Subcommittee on Homeland Security will come to order. I am pleased to be joined by the subcommittee's distinguished ranking member, the gentlelady from Illinois, when she gets here. Welcome, Secretary Noem. Last week, the Office of Management and Budget released the skinny fiscal year 2026 budget request. While we await the details of the full request, the focus of this hearing, will be a discussion of the department's priorities for the upcoming fiscal year. First, I want to address a few housekeeping items. Members will have differences of opinion on how the department should be run and what policies should be in place, especially as it relates to border security and immigration enforcement. However, I am asking members on both sides to keep today's discussion civil and focused on the work we need to do as appropriators to fund the Department of Homeland Security. By the way, I guess I would be remiss if I didn't welcome the chair of the full committee, who is here. But now I'd like to turn to my colleague, Mrs. Underwood, for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this hearing to conduct oversight of the Department of Homeland Security, and welcome Secretary Noem to your first hearing here. On this subcommittee, our job is to keep our country safe and to safeguard our values as Americans. Last year, working together, we secured consistent increases for border operations funding and helped bring encounters at the southern border down and seizures of narcotics, including fentanyl, up through critical investments at our ports of entry, CBP officers, and increases to Homeland Security investigations. Normally, I would focus my questions for the Secretary on the details of the President's budget, but I would be remiss if I did not mention that we are holding today's hearing without an actual budget for fiscal year 2026 to review, and the skinny budget released last Friday is filled more with politics than facts. So, let me begin with some facts that I think are important for the American people to hear about what you're doing with their money. Because 3 months into this administration, America is more vulnerable than it's ever been. Our homeland is not secure. In the first 100 days of the Trump administration, you have slashed our nation's cyber defenses, letting Russia, China, and Iran steal our top secrets and Americans' personal data. You've wasted hundreds of millions of dollars on illegal detention and deportation, including some people who are trying to come into this country, quote, the legal way within our broken immigration system, despite, by the department's own admission, southern border encounters already at record lows. Sent emails to U.S. citizens that read, please leave the United States immediately. Removed U.S. citizen children, including those with terminal illnesses. Raised the price tag of future disasters by cutting billions from projects across the country to make our infrastructure more resilient, including a bipartisan program that was enacted into law by President Trump himself, and taken millions of dollars away from the DHS workforce and operations for what appears to be taxpayer-funded political advertisements. During our Member Day hearing last month, I also raised the unacceptable and unconstitutional decisions this administration has been making with the funds provided to the department by this committee, including the sudden and unexplained termination of DHS grants to states, universities, and nonprofit organizations, the cancellation of the Disaster Relief Fund's BRIC program, violations of the Fifth Amendment right to due process enshrined in the Constitution, and reductions in force of parts of the department's Office of Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, Office of Citizenship and Immigration Services Ombudsman, as well as the Office of the Immigration Detention Ombudsman. I also have serious concerns with the administration's decision to revoke the bargaining rights for DHS personnel, with an exception made for unions that have vocally supported the president in the name of efficiency and combating waste, fraud, and abuse, but without any evidence to back those claims. Mr. Chairman, these are programs that Congress debated and ultimately funded. Our role as appropriators is to write the law and responsibly fund the government, and the executive's role is to execute that funding pursuant to the law. It is no secret the administration has ramped up immigration detention beyond what Congress funded. Increases to ICE at the expense of other national security programs and initiatives that members on both sides of the aisle voted for undermines our core work and congressional intent. DHS is cashing checks it simply doesn't have in hopes that reconciliation passes and will cover their shortfall. That is an incredibly risky strategy and only sets up essential national security agencies for failure or violations of the Anti-Deficiency Act. How does that secure the homeland? There have been bipartisan discussions surrounding the organizational structure of the Department of Homeland Security, whether it's making FEMA an independent agency or transferring components like the U.S. Coast Guard or the U.S. Secret Service to other departments. We will never shy away from discussions about how we can improve the department, but absent an enacted law from Congress making changes to the department's organizational structure, this subcommittee will continue to conduct oversight over all existing DHS components and provide for their continued funding in the Homeland Security bill. I know that there are many areas in this bill that share bipartisan support, and I am so proud of the relationship that Chairman Amodei and I have built. I know that even in this highly partisan environment, he and I are committed to welcoming ideas for how to improve the department and better manage the department. But the Trump administration's actions have pushed us to unprecedented and to a sobering moment. America is a democracy, not a dictatorship. In a democracy, we are organized around the rule of law, and those laws are based on a core set of constitutional rights. You may be familiar with the Bill of Rights. It includes the Fourth Amendment, which forbids unreasonable searches and seizures, the Fifth Amendment, which guarantees the right to due process, and the Sixth Amendment, which protects the right to a fair trial and legal counsel. As we endeavor to secure the homeland, we must continue to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States. That is not a secondary mission. Let me conclude and take a moment to recognize the dedication and commitment of the women and men of the Department of Homeland Security who carry out the department's vital missions that help protect the American people from a wide range of threats. Again, I want to thank the chairman for holding this hearing. Mr. Chairman, I look forward to working with you on a bill that reflects those shared priorities, keeps our country safe, and upholds our shared values as Americans. I yield back.
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. The chair now recognizes the chairman of the Full Appropriations Committee, Mr. Cole, for his opening comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Before I go to my prepared remarks, I just want to say what a pleasure it is to see our former colleague here and how proud we all are of you, your success as a governor, your success in this administration in its opening days. I don't know anybody that's been more effective in less time than you have, and the men and women that you lead and clearly lead so effectively. So I just want to thank you so much, honestly, as a friend and a colleague, but somebody that really appreciates the public service that you've already rendered this country in multiple ways. We're proud of you. Thank you again, Mr. Chairman, and Ranking Member Underwood, thank you. Madam Secretary, we really appreciate you being here today. Let me begin by commending the brave men and women of this department who stand on the front lines each day to protect the homeland. Under new leadership, they've been empowered to fully carry out that fundamental duty. From day one, the Trump administration has made clear that protecting America is not negotiable, and this White House has taken immediate action to strengthen the security of our nation's borders and enforce existing immigration laws. The contrast from the Biden administration could not be clearer. Policies that allowed an open and lawless border have ended, and the message is clear. Illegal migrants, including violent offenders, will no longer have an open invitation. Criminal cartels and traffickers will no longer be enriched, and the safety of our citizens will no longer be put last. In less than 100 days, we've watched our southern border go from chaos to closed. The decisive actions and common sense measures of the Trump administration have led to an historic turnaround, driving illegal crossings to record lows and ensuring removal of dangerous criminals. President Trump and his cabinet, particularly you, Madam Secretary, have delivered on the promise to have the most secure border in modern American history, and our nation is safer as a result. It's imperative that investments for effective border security enforcement are strong, and I'm dedicated to working with the members on this committee and across the Capitol to ensure the department is properly resourced. Secondly, I appreciate that the DHS mission doesn't end here. Living in Tornado Alley, Oklahomans are no strangers to devastation caused by natural disasters. Even now, a slow-moving storm and record-breaking rainfall is responsible for significant flooding in my state that's already resulted in the loss of life and a state of emergency declaration by our governor. When state and local resources are exhausted, we do rely on FEMA to bring additional capabilities that save residents, remove debris, and help our fellow citizens rebuild. This isn't a partisan issue. It's one that concerns states regardless of politics. I look forward to a discussion on ways to reform FEMA and improve federal emergency response capability while eliminating inefficiencies and wasteful spending. Programs like the Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities, or BRIC, grants have provided many communities with the means to mitigate the next disaster before it strikes, potentially saving taxpayers even more money. I support efforts like these that give local communities, including those in rural Oklahoma, resources to prevent further destruction. Madam Secretary, I know we're both committed to ensuring a safer and stronger communities across our nation. And thank you again for being here today. I look forward to your testimony. More importantly, just thank you for the job you're doing for the American people. The results have been spectacular and immediate, beyond, I think, what any of us could have expected. And that's in no small measure to the manner in which you've led. So we're grateful for your service. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chair wishes to put on the record that I have received no requests from anybody in the administration, the minority, or the majority that I do an opening statement. Accordingly, I will not be doing one. Not unusual. Madam Secretary, without objection, your full written statement will be entered into the record. With that in mind, we would ask you to summarize your opening statement to within 5 minutes. But, gentlelady from South Dakota, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Underwood, and members of this committee for giving me the honor of being before you today. As a former colleague of the House of Representatives, I recognize the important role that you play in oversight over the federal government and our agencies, and I'm grateful for the chance to come here and talk about all of the good work that the Department of Homeland Security has done, the employees and the people who walk alongside us each and every day to follow through on what President Trump has committed to the American people, and that is to make America safe again. Today, I'm very proud of the accomplishments that we've tackled, and we've delivered the most secure border in American history. At the southern border, we have obtained near total control with daily encounters now down over 93% since President Trump took office. March saw the lowest number of border encounters in recorded history in the history of the United States of America at just under 7,200. That means that there were days where we had less than 200 encounters, which again is the lowest in recorded history. Under the previous administration, U.S. Customs and Border Protection was at times encountering over 15,000 people a day, which mean efforts were diverted into processing and facilitating an invasion of our country instead of doing their jobs. This astonishing turnaround is a testament to the resolve and to the leadership of President Trump to make America safe again, and it is accomplished by the incredible work of the people of the department. The secure border has allowed the Border Patrol to zero in on cartels and their illicit activity, and President Trump has designated 6 different cartels and criminal gangs as foreign terrorist organizations. This has allowed us to use a whole-of-government approach to go after drug traffickers, human traffickers, and in March, fentanyl traffic at the border fell by 54% compared to the previous year. We are enforcing immigration laws to identify, to arrest, detain, and to remove dangerous illegal criminals out of our country. And we're prioritizing individuals that have committed crimes in our communities. Aliens are a threat to our public safety and to our national security, and especially those that are affiliated with terrorist organizations such as Tren de Aragua and MS-13. This includes those who have final orders of removal in place are a priority for this administration. We've also worked with President Trump on his America First trade agenda through the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol actions and enforcement. The Biden administration hollowed out America's industrial base, and they shipped our jobs overseas. Well, President Trump is changing all of that. His actions are proving that tariffs are an effective negotiating tool to address trade imbalances. And in fact, companies are reshoring jobs here in America every single day. The Department of Homeland Security is reforming and rethinking federal improvement in our involvement in emergency response and management as well. President Trump recently announced new members to the FEMA Review Council, which I will co-chair with the Secretary of Defense. Now, this council is charged with fixing a broken system, and it is a system that will, when fixed, return power to state emergency management directors to make America safe again. And we're also taking steps to defend the nation's transportation systems, which are vulnerable to targets and attacks. The Transportation Security Administration is responsible for ensuring the security of all of those that travel. In a single day, there are over 45,000 flights and nearly 2.9 people travel on our airlines and our passengers in the United States. We're fulfilling our obligation to enforce and to launch Real ID in order to follow federal law that was enacted nearly 20 years ago. Validated IDs will secure travel, safeguard our elections, and make sure that we never experience and work to prevent a 9/11 attack again. As technology advances, so do the threats to our nation, and that's why cybersecurity is so crucial to our future. Countries like Communist China have both the capability and the intent to infiltrate and to potentially disrupt our critical infrastructure systems. The Homeland Security Department is responsible for 10 of the 16 different critical infrastructures. And despite these threats, the Biden administration instead used CISA to play politics and to police speech. Under President Trump, we've been working to get CISA back on mission and to make sure that they're focused on cybersecurity. Now, the Coast Guard is the only branch of our military and our U.S. Armed Forces that is under the umbrella of the Department of Homeland Security, and it has many different missions with specialized needs going forward. As we secure our southern border, the cartels have shifted their activities to our maritime borders, and the Coast Guard has already surpassed fiscal year 2024 in the amount of drug interdiction numbers that they have encountered, and they have also excelled at search and rescue and illegal interdiction. Since the Coast Guard is facing our greatest readiness crisis right now since World War II, we need to act to make sure they have the tools, training, and equipment that they need to be the tip of the spear in our national security response. We have a plan to reinvigorate the Coast Guard, and this is a critical component of our Homeland Security mission. Now, with Force Design 2028, which some of you may have heard about already, we will transform the Coast Guard into a more agile, capable, and a responsive force. And since I took office, one of the responsibilities that I have is reforming the Secret Service in the wake of the July 13th assassination attempt on President Trump. We have reassessed the Secret Service's needs. We've refocused recruitment away from what the Biden administration was prioritizing with DEI objectives, and instead bring people in with experience and with training that align with the agency's zero-fail mission. These accomplishments are just a portion, Mr. Chairman, of what the department has achieved in just 100 days. And with the support of this committee, we'll be able to make the department more efficient and more effective into the future. I want to thank Chairman Cole for his kind words. It has truly been one of my greatest honors to have been able to serve with him in his advocacy for the people in his district, but not just the people in his district, but the history to which he's represented the people of the United States. He's a true statesman that works across the aisle to come up with solutions. I'm so grateful for all of you, but I'm grateful for the people that work every day in the Department of Homeland Security. They are examples of bravery and dedication, patriotism, and perseverance. It's our responsibility to give them the resources that they need to meet the challenges of the day, to give them the training and equipment that they rely on to be successful for the American people. But we also have to remain accountable to the American taxpayer and make sure that we're spending money appropriately and where it should be spent to serve them the best. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. I'm going to hold off on my questions until the members have got done to see if some of them are duplicative. And so, Ms. Underwood, the floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This weekend, the president made the remarkable statement that he, quote, doesn't know whether he has to uphold the Constitution. You, however, have taken a different position, both in your confirmation hearing and when you took the oath of office. You said that you were committed to complying with the Constitution. Do you still stand by that statement?
Absolutely. I believe President Trump
Excellent.
as well.
Let's start with Article 1, which gives Congress and only Congress the power of the purse. No money shall be drawn from the Treasury, but in consequence of appropriations made by law. But this administration is freezing, terminating, and even clawing back federal grants and awards that were already signed into law. These are taxpayer dollars that were appropriated by Congress for the specific purposes that we laid out. So, Secretary, let me ask you, do you believe the administration has the authority to subvert appropriations law to freeze and terminate congressional funding?
The administration and the Department of Homeland Security used our authorities that we have to evaluate every grant that was in front of us and meet statutory requirements, but also to make sure that they were being spent appropriate.
So, of
What
course,
we
the
did for
president
these
is within
grants
his
was
authorities.
to make sure that
Ma'am, this
we
is
went
my time.
forward.
Thank you so much. Of course, the president's within his authorities to drive policy decisions within the bounds of federal law and the Constitution, but that's not what you've been doing. What I'm asking is whether you believe you have the authority to ignore appropriations law. Do you believe that the Constitution gives the executive branch unilateral authority to withhold funds appropriated by the legislative branch?
We have evaluated grants to make sure if they're being spent appropriately, and work that is underway and was authorized has continued. Other grants that have not been started and have not been authorized or obligated, we have reevaluated. And I think you're talking specifically about grants potentially within FEMA that were non-disaster related grants.
I'm talking
And those
broadly, ma'am,
programs are
and
being-
Article 2 does not give the executive the authority to withhold funds, period. And multiple courts have weighed in to agree. Multiple courts have ruled in agreement. Congress controls the power of the purse. That is a fact. That's not a question. That is a fact. And so if the president disagrees with certain spending, Congress passed the Impoundment Act to create a legal process to seek rescissions, and we expect him to follow the law. This administration is not just ignoring the constitutional power of the people's elected representatives. It is also violating the fundamental right of individuals. Do you believe that the Constitution grants everyone in our country the right to due process, including non-citizens?
The administration has the authority to.
Ma'am,
look
I'm
at
looking for a
while
yes or
grants are
no
spent and
question.
to
Yes or no. Do you believe the
reappropriate them
Constitution?
as
Yes,
appropriate.
ma'am. Do you,
We have
ma'am?
not conducted in
Reclaiming
any
my
kind
time,
of
Mr.
impoundment.
Chairman.
Time is yours.
Okay. Secretary Noem, I'm just looking for a yes or no here. Do you believe the Constitution guarantees due process to everyone in America?
Due process is exactly what this Congress
Yes
lays out.
or
that
no?
it is, and
Okay,
the
ma'am,
tools
I'll take
you
that as
give
a
us
no.
on due process
Excuse me,
is
I'm trying,
afforded to.
ma'am, I'm trying to ascertain your understanding of the law as it applies to your department. And you as its leader should be able to give us a yes or no answer because judge after judge has ruled that the law is not being followed. Do you believe that the U.S. government has the authority to deport American citizens?
No, and we are not deporting
great.
U.S. citizens.
I'm so happy to hear that you do not believe that the law gives you that authority because the federal government has no authority under U.S. laws to deport any American citizen. And as I know, everyone viewing this hearing today knows that several American citizens have been deported to
haven't.
date.
That is not
Secretary
true.
Noem, that was not a question. Secretary Noem, that oath that we both swore before taking office was to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States, not the president, not a political party, the Constitution. And that's what we're going to keep doing here at the Appropriations Committee. Thank you. I yield back.
Chair now recognizes the gentleman from Oklahoma, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, for questions. Mr. Cole, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, again, great to have you here. In your service, you've prioritized detaining and removing literally the worst of the worst in our country that have arrived here illegally, including those that have committed violent crimes against our fellow Americans. I think we're all in support of that effort. Can you tell us, and you may not have this information, I'm just curious, how many illegal aliens have committed serious offenses against our own citizens?
Yeah, there are tens of thousands of illegal aliens that have committed crimes against individuals in this country, and we have worked very hard to make sure that those are the individuals that we're going after and deporting as soon as possible. There have been over 160,000 repatriations targeting these individuals, returning them back to their home countries and facing consequences and legal action because of that. President Trump has told us to make these individuals a priority and to also make sure that we're identifying those with final removal orders to remove. And overwhelmingly, the American people have supported this. One of the things that I would say is that was unfortunate was the Biden administration closed an office within ICE that helped us better track criminal activity by illegal aliens and to give resources to those families, to let them be informed on when cases were in court, if the perpetuator of their crime was going to be released, if they were in custody. The Voices office within ICE was opened under the first Trump administration, and President Biden closed that office, I believe, to cover up exactly how many crimes were committed against people in this country by illegal aliens. We have reopened that office. We believe that that data would be helpful, and they're continuing to work with people who have been victims of illegal crimes and illegal alien activity in this country. But those data and that information, I don't think we'll ever truly know how much crime was committed and how many were committed against American citizens because the Biden administration refused to track those victims and those crimes as they were perpetuated.
Well, I commend you for reopening the office. Let me, just as a quick follow-up, ask you, again, this may be information that is not readily available, but I'm curious if we know how many illegal aliens have actually currently have final orders for removal from an immigration judge, and we just haven't had an opportunity to execute those orders.
Well, that is the challenge that we have, is that we have literally millions of illegal aliens that have overstayed or are here illegally that need to have a final order as issued. We have hundreds of thousands that are going out and targeted and being removed from this country today that ICE is working every day in coordination with all other areas of our government to get them removed from our country. But we do have a backlog because this was not a priority under the last administration. So we have up to 1 million cases that are backlogged that need to be processed by an immigration judge in an immigration court in order to make sure that we are having those final removal orders and that we can take action on them.
I want to commend you. You mentioned your statement about pushing on the Real ID Act. I know that's not an easy thing to do, and I'm sure when the day comes, about 30% of the people, as I understand it, that travel still don't have that documentation. Amongst the things you have to consider are what kinds of IDs are acceptable. I would encourage you, as you do that, to look carefully at tribal IDs. I know certainly in South Dakota, but in Oklahoma, we have a lot of our citizens that use those as primary sources, and clearly they need to meet the standards you lay out. But whatever you could do in that regard to both keep those folks informed and work with them so they get into compliance would be very appreciated.
We do, tomorrow is the day that Real ID will finally be enforced. It's been a law that's been in place for over 20 years. 81% of the travelers that travel by airline in the United States today are already compliant. So they have IDs that already they will be able to use just like they normally always have been. We will be honoring passports, other federally recognized IDs. Tribal IDs will be recognized. So thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that. And what will happen tomorrow is folks will come through the line and will be issue their ID and show it. If it's not compliant, they may be diverted to a different line, have an extra step, but people will be allowed to fly. We recognize that this is a security issue. Congress has had many, many years to reevaluate it and decide if they wanted to change the law or to stop it, and the Biden administration chose that it should go into place on May 7th, and we intend to follow the law. So we will make sure that it is as seamless as possible and that travelers will get to stay on their intended itinerary, but we are telling people that this law will be enforced and it will allow us to know individuals in this country who they are and that they're authorized to travel.
Well, I'm about out of time, so I'm going to mention a quick thing and then probably submit it for the record so you have time to respond. I am very interested in the BRIC grants, which again, we did pass when President Trump was there. Would love to be updated as you figure out how you're going to reform those, but they have been extraordinarily valuable, I think, to communities. And like all grants, they can be used correctly or or misuse. I don't have any problem with evaluating things, particularly in the last frenzied days of any administration. Sometimes a lot of stuff slips through that you wish hadn't in retrospect. But please know that there's strong bipartisan support for that program, as there was when President Trump, introduced it and signed it into law back in 2018. So love to know more when you can about your plans to reform those grants, but hopefully keep them operating.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Cuellar. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, it's good to see you. I was going to show you, but I think the rules don't allow me to show you just something because I just want to talk about basics, but hopefully we can sit down later and I can show you what I'm referring to. Want to talk about some of the basics. I live at the border, lived all my life there. Want to talk to you about river roads. I want to talk to you about Carrizo cane, technology that's needed, aerostats, and cameras that are not working, and some infrastructure. Basics that are needed for border security. My area, Laredo, it's the largest inland port, bigger than LA, bigger than any other place in the country. We get 18,000 trailers a day. We're about to expand from 8 lanes to 18, plus another bridge. We got 2 of them, 2 rail bridge. So trade is very important to us. But when we talk about illegal crossings, we've been the second lowest crossing in the country, and we still are out there. I think right now, latest numbers, 30 people, maybe 40 people a day coming through my area, which is almost nothing. So thank you for that. River roads, the river roads, and I wish I could show this just to show you, but the river roads go this way. Let's say the river's here. The river roads, the roads go this way. So Border Patrol can go here, but they can't go across. So what we're asking is for river roads to follow the river itself, and I think that would be a big investment, a good investment that we need. So one is the river roads. The other thing is the Carrizo cane. The Carrizo cane, I know you got some folks from people that are very familiar, but the Carrizo cane will grow almost the size of this. And it's not good for Border Patrol. I think Tony Gonzalez and folks that are from the border understand, we ought to get rid of that Carrizo cane on our river, but get the Mexicans to do that. I'll show you the maps, and I know you've been out there, but it shows you the Carrizo cane is on both sides. If we can clear that up, get the Mexicans to do that, that will be good for Border Patrol. So river roads, Carrizo cane, technology in my area, only 1/3 of the cameras are working, and if you ask some of the other Border Patrol, they're not working. Basically, they're using the RVS, which is an old model. They're trying to get the AST towers where more better to use, or whatever technology. But this old technology is like going to a car and you fix it, and they keep coming. The same thing they're doing right now, they keep bringing folks that are coming in to fix it up. 1/3 of the cameras are working, 2/3 are not working. That's not right. Procurement process needs to be better so they can move faster to buy that technology. And finally, there are dead spots. Even now, with the modern technology, Border Patrol can be in certain areas and dangerous areas, and they don't have the technology and radio that's working. Aerostats, the military has a lot of them in surplus. The problem is in the past administrations, they've hired contractors that Homeland was paying too much money. So we need to look at those aerostats that are available from the military surplus itself. Border Patrol, I think right now we got 19,327. We funded 22,000, and we need to hire more. OFO, the men and women in blue, were at 26,334. We're still below the modeling, so we need to hire those officers. So those are some of the things, and I know I gave you a whole bunch of things, but there's the basic things that are important to Border Patrol. Last point, as we try to hire new Border Patrol, I know the reconciliation has something that will affect them that has to do with Social Security supplement. I've talked to a lot of Border Patrol agents, and right now they're crunching the numbers. Do I retire at the age of 52 or do I have 57? what's going to happen with that supplemental. So instead of focusing on the border, they're human beings and they're focusing on that. I know that's another committee, but those are the basics that I know I don't have enough time, but I would love to follow up with you and your folks on.
Absolutely. I will certainly do that, Congressman. And I want to thank you for talking about the technology needs and the investments that we need at the border in order for these agents to truly do their job and do it with excellence. I will tell you that recruitment at CBP is up over 50%. So as we've allowed them to go back and to do their jobs, we have had more and more interest in people, more applications coming in, and I think that's a fantastic trend, that as people talk about how discouraging it was over the last several years by them not having their hands tied, that now that they actually get to secure the border and work for the American people, that they're recruiting more and more help to be assisting along the way. Thank you. And we'll follow up on the rest of these conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cuellar. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Rutherford, the floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Secretary Noem, I have to say, it's already been mentioned a couple times, the amazing speed with which you all turned around the southern border. And I know that a big piece of that was your endorsement of the 287G program. You know, I fought with Secretary Mayorkas, your predecessor, to try and expand that program. He refused to do it, even though his own acting ICE secretary said in a hearing before this committee that 287G was the best thing since sliced bread because it protected officers and the community. And so I want to thank you for that. You all came in and overnight, it seems, added 300 agencies to the 287G program. That's an amazing accomplishment, and I think that's a reason for a lot of the success that you've seen there. In fact, my own agency, where I had started 287G back 15 years ago, we were part of Operation Tidal Wave, and just great success in Florida with all the sheriffs and chiefs coming together. 1,120 illegal aliens taken off the street, 63% of which, Madam Secretary, actually had criminal arrests and convictions prior to that. So two questions about 287G. Number one, what can we do to help you get more agencies involved? And number two, what do you need from the standpoint of technology? You just mentioned the technology. What can we do to help you get those agencies trained and the technology that they need to get into those databases so that we can actually run these 287G programs, which are better than sliced bread, at top efficiency?
Yeah, well, thank you, Congressman, for talking about this program, because it is incredibly important to our strategy of having the enforcement that we need to really address the criminal activities that we've seen out on the ground. 287G is a partnership between our officers, ICE, CBP, that brings everybody to the table. It's an agreement that's signed with local law enforcement or state law enforcement that allows us to operate in a task force model to go out and make sure that we're having more bodies, more people a part and backup of these operations on the ground going after dangerous criminals. We have today, I believe, 598 agreements out there across the country, over 6,200 different officers that has brought alongside of us to work alongside of us to protect our communities, and they've done incredible work. You referenced what was done in Florida on Operation Tidal Wave. Those 1,120 dangerous criminals are off the streets now today, and they are people that were here illegally, broke our laws, and now they are having the opportunity to face consequences and to go home to their home countries. I would say that we're looking for more agreements like that across the country, and we'll continue to build on it. What Florida did by having a whole of state approach is what we want to build out and model in every other state as well. And we've had partnerships from the DEA, ATF, DOJ, state highway patrols. We've had, obviously ICE, U.S. Marshals, CBP, local law enforcement, cities, county sheriffs. People who've committed their whole life to upholding the law and having the scales of justice apply equally to everybody are a part of this team. And it has been wonderful to see people jump in and be a part of it to make sure that we have not just the authorities that we need to go out there and to work, but also to have the local knowledge and the people in their community that really want to be a part of the solution and making them safe again.
Well, we look forward to continuing that. I want to ask very quickly, I don't have much time left, but I want to ask about these recalcitrant countries that, we have 1.2 million deportation orders out there that are waiting for these countries to take them back. I was shocked under the Biden administration that Secretary Mayorkas claimed he couldn't send them home because they wouldn't take them. But now I understand that now that you're in charge of DHS and the Trump administration State Department working together, that there's been some change in that. And can you talk a little bit about how that's going?
Yeah, so the Department of State is the entity that negotiates travel documents and the ability to repatriate people back to their home countries. And they've done phenomenal work in giving us the opportunity to do that. There are some countries that are still refusing to take their own citizens, and I would reiterate that every single country has a responsibility to take their citizens back. And that has always been something that has been an international common sense agreement that has existed. Many of the countries today, even as they are working with us, aren't taking their citizens home very quickly. They may limit us to 1 or 2 planes a week. Mexico had a limitation on us for quite a period of time, even a limitation on what kind of aircraft we could use. And so working with those countries is a diplomatic job that consistently needs to be stayed on top of. So many times while we have people that are brought into our facilities and ready to be returned home, getting those travel documents and the permission to return them to their countries is incredibly important.
Thank you very much for getting them out. I see my time's expired. I yield back.
Chair recognizes the gentleman from Hawaii, Mr. Case. The floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Madam Secretary, I appreciate your rosy report on the Department of Homeland Security. I have a different view on where the department is today and where you, and by you I'm going to refer to the President, the administration, and you as Secretary, are taking it as reflected in your actions and budgets, not just in your words. But I think it's important that we start by some points of agreement. First of all, I think you would agree, I hope you would agree, that the 270 or so thousand members of the DHS workforce, if that's what the figure is now, and we
Yep,
would
it's
like to
supposed to.
find out what the figure is at some point, spread across your 22 departments, all deserve our praise for their dedication, for serving our country every day, and they also deserve our professional respect. I think we would also agree that the efforts to legally reduce illegal immigration and illegal drugs of the past couple of years across our borders are paying off and should be continued. So I agree with you on those things. Overall, however, and focusing on the budget, because this is the Appropriations Committee, what little you have shown us thus far of your FY 2026 budget, it looks like you are definitely overfunding some efforts, mainly for messaging purposes, at the expense of some other efforts that are really critical, such as cybersecurity, disaster prevention and mitigation, transportation security. And you're using budget gimmicks to misdirect and conceal your intent. On your budget gimmicks, you claim a 65% increase in DHS's overall budget, targeted at the border, drugs, and the Coast Guard. But all of that increase or more is loaded into your separate reconciliation bill. You have essentially, for this purposes of this committee, level funded DHS and loaded all of the extra money into reconciliation. First of all, aside from completely sidetracking this particular committee, which is supposed to be doing that funding, you should know, if you don't already, that this is not an appropriate use of reconciliation. It's intended to maintain the illusion of responsible budgeting. It certainly is holding needed DHS increases, which many of us would support in other situations, hostage to your overall reconciliation plan of continuing tax cuts for billionaires and slashes in critical programs like Medicaid. So the question I have, and it's a rhetorical question since I'm making a statement here, is why don't you just come into this committee and say it straight? We need a 65% or more increase in DHS to actually protect our national security. Your increase is also heavily skewed to the border, generally and CPB specifically, some 20 billion, all of it in reconciliation. And nobody disputes that CPB needs help. I've been to the border 3 times myself. I've spent time with the agents, and certainly personnel and equipment costs are necessary. But a question that I have from an oversight perspective is, if you are claiming such success at the border, which without spending all of this extra money which you're now asking for, do we need to do that at the expense of other programs? And I mean the non-personnel stuff. You're also loading half of your reconciliation increase into the U.S. Coast Guard, $21 billion. And everybody agrees that the Coast Guard needs help. It's critical in the Indo-Pacific, where you have actually withdrawn from the Indo-Pacific, which I think was a tremendous mistake. Why don't you just ask for that in your base budget rather than trying to hide and extort it in reconciliation? Your budget also ignores and even attacks other critical functions of DHS, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, or CISA, which I think we would all agree is critical to direct national defense, but also civilian infrastructure, which is the most exposed right now, and the reliance of foreign countries on our expertise to help them with their cybersecurity, and yet you propose to reduce CISA by 20% in your base budget. And I don't think that you can claim that that's all somehow Biden misdirection. FEMA, another example of misbudgeting in my view. You, first of all, collectively have directed very incorrect and outright mean criticism at FEMA, which is just undeserved by FEMA. And it's time to put the political campaign behind us and acknowledge that FEMA is doing a good job. They did an outstanding job on Maui, and I sat with them on Maui when they were trying their very best and did their very best while their president was criticizing their work. We don't need this, and further, we certainly need to fund them adequately. Transportation Security Administration, same basic observation, a critical agency which you have not adequately funded. So fundamentally, my time is running short. Obviously, this is a critical agency. It deserves to be led responsibly and transparently. It deserves to be budgeted for transparently and responsibly. And until we get there, I do not feel safer under your leadership at DHS.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if I can respond quickly. Thank you for your comments, and I'd like to respond to you. If I don't have time today, I will in writing or in answers to other questions. But we have focused on making sure that we're going forward with a Department of Homeland Security that focuses on what our mission is, and that is to secure America's homeland and do that while being accountable to taxpayers. So every single component I have, 23 different departments, we have gone back to their mission statement on what they were intended to do and put them back on mission. So in CISA, instead of doing censorship, misinformation, disinformation, they're back to securing our critical infrastructure. TSA, all we're doing there in the reductions is reducing empty FTEs that were never filled or don't have TSOs in them now, and asking for TSA officials to do work that they were intended to do, not to do unskilled technical work by monitoring exit lanes. So I could go through all of them that you mentioned. FEMA as well. The president has indicated he wants to eliminate FEMA as it exists today, and to have states have more control over their emergency management response. He wants to empower local governments and support them in how they respond to their people. So thank you for identifying what you're concerned about, and I look forward to having conversations with you so that I can answer the questions that you have and reassure you that this Department of Homeland Security is accountable, but it is also going to fulfill the mission for which it was created after the horrific events of 9/11. Thank you.
Thank you. The floor belongs to the gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Newhouse, for your questions.
Well, thank you, the gentleman from Nevada and the lady from Illinois as well. Thank you, Secretary Noem, for being here with us to discuss. This is our agency, the Homeland Security. I want to focus on a couple things that I've spent a lot of time working on, and when you were in the House, you did too, and I want to thank you for that. That has to do with agricultural labor. I was very delighted to hear President Trump in early April make several, and I thought were very important comments about the agricultural labor force, as well as some of the, what would you call, hotel, entertainment kind of workers, whose current workforce certainly are lack a legal status. So I'm talking about H-2A and H-2B. he proposed a plan to allow undocumented agricultural workers an opportunity to touch back with the ability to come back to the United States with achieving a legal status. I can't overestimate or overstate the importance, as you know, of an agricultural labor force to produce food and fiber in our country. So I wanted you, if you could, provide any kind of an update that you could share with us on the discussions there at the cabinet level. But also, in that same vein, a major cattle producer and processor in Washington and Idaho recently shared some of their concerns with I believe it's called the termination of parole process for Cubans, Haitians, Venezuelans, and Nicaraguans. Apparently, the workforce there, up to 15% of their workforce is made up of people from those countries. And so I wanted to give you an opportunity to either speak with us about that or follow up with my staff later.
No, thank you so much for talking about the important programs that we have to facilitate a workforce in this country that have contributed so much in certain industries and different areas going forward. President Trump has been very clear that he believes that people that are here illegally need to go home. He has backed that up with his policies that you don't get to come into this country and have the law apply to some people and not others, that the scales of justice should apply equally to everyone, and that individuals who are here illegally need to face consequences for that and go home. I think one of the reasons that you've heard us recently talk about self-deportation is because our preference is that the individuals who are here illegally self-deport. We will facilitate purchasing their plane ticket and a stipend once they return to their home country, so they have the opportunity to do exactly what you talked about by touchback. They have the opportunity to come back to America then and to do it the right way. They will face the consequences for breaking our laws originally, but we want everybody to have the opportunity to be a part of the American dream. If individuals who are here illegally wait until we have to go out and find them, arrest them, deport them, spend up to $17,000 by getting them back home to their home countries, President Trump has been very clear. They will never get the chance to come back. So I would encourage everyone in this country that is in these industries to proactively tell the story. That's why you've seen us aggressively carrying the message to people that the United States is now following the law, that we are now securing our borders, and that we're getting people out of our country who've broken our laws. But if you do work with us, that you will have the opportunity to come back. Those visa programs are ones that we continue to have discussions with the administration, with many of you on. There's some latitude given to the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, but I will remind you that Congress consistently maintains the authority to determine how many are issued in this country and if they are issued into the future. And so we always will follow that as that goes forward. And as you talk about the importance of what the work we do at the Department of Homeland Security, I know that working with these folks that are in these different industries, that we will continue to have those conversations with all of you. When we talk about different policies that the department is following, many times it's Congress, it's the House of Representatives and Senate who sets the policy that we are following and gives us the authority to do and take the actions that we are.
Okay, very good. Look forward to working with you
Yes,
more
thank
on that. And just in the short amount of time I have left, the harbor maintenance tax.
Yes.
A lot of countries are essentially bypassing that, bringing goods, importing them to the United States through either Canada or Mexico, and foregoing paying any kind of tax that way. Certainly we have a lot of illicit drugs coming through. We need to get a handle on that as well. But in your testimony, you highlighted the importance of the CBP enforcing tariffs on imports, and this seems to be an appropriate place to put a lot of time and energy. I'm going to, just so you know, I'll have some legislation here shortly addressing this kind of stuff, but I wanted to draw your attention to a lot of the efforts that other countries are going through to avoid paying that tax.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out and for talking about it in this committee hearing, because I think a lot of people don't realize that that's one of the factors that we're dealing with too at the federal level, is having other countries unfairly manipulate their processes to avoid paying what is due to the American people. Since President Trump has been in office, CBP has made 21 different enforcement actions on tariffs. So they've put in place that many adjustments and changes to other countries as goods and services come into this country. and have done it with excellence. I'll remind everybody that CBP is the oldest law enforcement agency in the country and has collected tariffs for many, many, many years. And so they have adjusted and done well with President Trump negotiating with these countries to finally treat our consumers and our country fairly when we've been so mistreated in trade agreements in the past.
Well, thank you.
But that is a part of the discussion that the president continues to have with these other entities that have manipulated that.
Very much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
The gentlelady from Texas, the floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Madam Ranking Member. Secretary Noem, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. I'm proud to represent my border community of El Paso, Texas. Born and raised there, third generation border resident. My kids are fourth generation. I have a lot of questions, and I've structured them in a way that they should be simple yes or no. So I'm going to ask that you please respond as simply as possible so I can get through as many of my questions as possible. My first question is, when the Department of Homeland Security makes a mistake, will you assure this committee and Congress that DHS, that you will acknowledge that mistake, take accountability for it, and rectify it, most importantly?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'll follow back up with that question. I want to first, one of the first topics I want to talk about is what President Trump said recently: homegrowns are next. And I'd like to enter into the record an NPR story. Homegrowns are next. Trump hopes to deport and jail U.S. citizens abroad. I was happy to hear your acknowledgement that that is not legal, but I am curious about the reconciliation bill and the appropriations requests that you will make. Will any of the funding, either through appropriations or through reconciliation, be used to execute this policy idea of Donald Trump's, which is deporting U.S. citizens abroad?
We have not deported any U.S. citizens, and so that false media narrative that you've heard out there just simply isn't true.
Well,
what I would say.
So my question, yes or no, will
comes
the
to
reconciliation or
and the
appropriations
dollars
be
that-
used for that?
The reconciliation dollars that we've asked for is $175 billion that will be focused and is reflected
But
in
yes
what the
or no,
president
will it be
released.
used for those purposes which
we are-
Donald Trump acknowledged
We're
is
going
a
to continue to use the
policy?
authorities and follow the Constitution to
Okay.
implement
All right.
policies that will make
Reclaiming
sure.
my time. I'd like to now focus on U.S. citizens who were deported. In fact, 3 children so far, likely more children. One of those children with cancer who was deported without the medication necessary to address that child's cancer. Again, a U.S. citizen. The lawyers have said that they were not given, the family was not given an opportunity to make plans for the kids. And so they were deported, essentially, again, U.S. citizens. I have a question about the forms that ICE is supposed to utilize when engaging with parents who have children, the parents who are being deported, and the U.S. citizen children. One of those forms is ICE Form 71-078, or the Caregiver Designation at Arrest form. Were any of the individuals who were deported, who had U.S. citizen children deported with them, were they given an opportunity to sign that form?
When these, the specific cases that you're referencing with these children, it was the parents' choice to take their children with them.
Did ICE
Which it is the
follow
policy of
through
the
on the
Trump
policy?
administration to keep families together.
Ma'am,
That is what we have continued
reclaiming
to
my
do, is
time.
that
I
these
told you at the
children,
top of this,
their
ma'am,
parents took the-
ma'am, reclaiming my time. I said the questions are really simple, yes or no. Was that form used in any of those cases?
I will get back
yes
to you
or
on
no?
that
Okay,
specific form. I
perfect.
don't know the
Thank
number,
you,
but I do
that's-
know these mothers
Okay,
went on the
thank you.
record
The
filling out
second form,
paperwork
ma'am,
and in
reclaiming my
interviews
time.
reiterating
Ma'am,
they wanted
please,
to keep their
ma'am,
children with them.
reclaiming my time. I'd like you to avoid the filibuster so I can get to all my questions, please.
Answering your questions
So
with
the second ICE form that I'd like to ask you about is ICE Form 71-76, which is also it's pre-removal parental interests election form. Can you get back to me on that? Were all of the parents allowed to sign that? Are the parents allowed to speak to lawyers before they're deported or to speak to their U.S. citizen spouses before they're deported?
They are given the opportunity.
Okay, so you can guarantee that every one of those parents,
We followed all the normal policies and procedures and
so they were
everything.
allowed
Every
to
case was
talk to a
handled
lawyer? That's a
exactly
yes?
as it is authorized.
Is that
and
a
laid
yes?
out by-
That's a yes?
Everything was handled
That's-
appropriately and
but
correctly.
did they
in
all
every
get to
single
talk
case
to a
that you've
lawyer? Okay,
addressed
reclaiming my
Under the
time.
policy.
Mr. Chairman, unfortunately, I'm out of time. I have a number of other questions we'll get to in the next round. Thank you.
Gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Siscomani, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Secretary Noem, for being here with us today and for your testimony and your leadership and that of all the men and women that you serve with as well in the Department of Homeland Security. Like you, I come from a border state, and though the northern and southern borders are vastly different, I know you understand firsthand the challenges that our communities at the border face, as well as the value that they bring also to our states and our region. The security that this administration has been able to deliver to our southern border is, in such a short period of time, is astounding and so well appreciated by those who live and work in these communities. I know I hear it all the time. This is the number one feedback I get from my constituents regarding the results that we've seen from this administration, and your leadership has played a key role in that, so thank you. In the district that I represent, which is much of the Tucson sector of Border Patrol, we have historically seen high numbers of gotaways. I understand there have been around 65,000 gotaways this fiscal year. What resources or what resource investments for both technology and infrastructure are you planning to make, and how those will be reduced in numbers for the future? The gotaways, of course, are troubling. We've seen a lot of the reported numbers come down, but these gotaways, that's I know it's a key issue for you as well and a focus. So on that, and then particularly, could you speak onto the technology that we'll be using in these rough terrain areas like Southern Arizona, which is so different from other border areas, including my friends in Texas. When you go to Arizona, it's just broad terrain, rough, some areas, hard to even build any kind of barrier or wall. So technology plays a big role there. Can you speak to that?
Yes, thank you so much for talking about the fact that as we've secured our border and as we've addressed the challenges and in the areas of the southern border and northern border where we saw a lot of folks crossing illegally, and we've put more resources in those areas or what was necessary to really follow our federal law and keep American people safe. We've seen that some of the traffic has pushed to other areas, maybe areas that weren't well-traveled before, and now gotaways are trying to take advantage of that. They also have pushed heavily towards the maritime borders and out into the waters. The Coast Guard is seeing much more traffic. They're also seeing the cartel activity out there of trafficking of drugs and human beings and technologies that they're having a difficult time keeping up with. The Coast Guard has been neglected for many, many years, and they don't have the airframe, and they don't have the cutters to keep up and even to manage and maintain the horsepower needs that they have to catch and interdict some of the smuggling activities that are going on. You referenced some of the rough terrain and what we need to do as far as CBP and investment on this border. Frankly, we're going to use the latest and greatest technology that would be available to us as far as surveillance equipment, cameras, satellite images when possible, and also the Aerostar, like Congressman Cuellar was talking about, some of those technologies in areas to help those vulnerable areas have more eyesight to truly know what is crossing there so that we can interdict it before it comes into our country. I would talk exclusively too about how we've been able to diplomatically work with the country of Mexico. President Trump's strong leadership has helped Mexico be more proactive than they ever were before too. And so in my conversations with government officials, they've indicated to me there could be as many as 500 to 600,000 illegals that never reached our border because when they got to Mexico and heard that our border was closed, they turned around and went back. So a combination of solutions is needed. You absolutely have to have a president that cares about keeping us safe. We now have that in President Trump, but also making sure that we have the people and the equipment necessary for CBP and for ICE to do their job, but then the technology which you referenced, which is needed. We have scanners that we need at ports of entry so that we can scan our shipments, our rail, and even our air freight. Much of that, we don't necessarily know what's coming in containers and small packages. Those technologies are critically important, and why you see a request in increase in funding to address those challenges that simply were neglected for too long under the Biden administration.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. You know, you mentioned the diplomatic conversations as well. I think that's something that doesn't get enough attention of the power of strong leadership in the White House now and the reaction of not only Mexico, but the rest of Latin America on this. I think that's key, and we want to partner with Mexico and other countries on this. With the little time that I have left, do you mind just speaking of the morale of the agents and your efforts on recruiting and retention? I think that goes hand in hand with the technology piece as well.
Yeah, the morale of the Department of Homeland Security agencies and departments and the employees that work there is fantastic. We have incredible numbers in recruitment, people who want to be a part of the agency that are signing up and submitting applications. I referenced earlier that CBP has over 50%, I believe it's 54% increase in recruitment. ICE as well, maintaining and excelling at its recruitment efforts and getting officers and people who want to be a part of the team or coming out of retirement. We have the Coast Guard is at 108% increase of its recruitment. People that understand the mission and they want to be a part of the many different skill sets that the Coast Guard can bring to partnering with our military departments, but also going out there and helping at the border and continuing on with their search and rescue mission. And then you look at the Secret Service, because of the recruitment efforts that we've had in putting those agents back on focusing, hiring expertise, hiring experience, instead of DEI programs, the Secret Service recruitment is up almost 200%. The applications we've gotten have been fantastic by telling our story and that they can be a part of an agency that protects the most powerful in the world. It truly has been inspirational. So I believe that some of the narrative that the Democrats have used to attack the Department of Homeland Security just simply isn't true. The people that are wanting to come and work for us are inspirational and they're true Americans.
Thank you for that. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gonzalez, the floor is yours for questions.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here. I hope you know how committed this committee is to working alongside you and the President to get this done. I mean, here we have the chairman of the full committee sitting throughout the entire duration. So this is just the first of many things. I want to thank you for making your first official trip as secretary. You went to the border, right? You went to Del Rio in my district, and you saw it firsthand. You're not new to this as governor. You were very active along that. So on that note, I want to get your opinion on states being reimbursed for some of the fundings, particularly Texas. What are your thoughts on Texas being reimbursed for some of the funding that we've had to pay for this?
Yeah, it's been incredible, the partnership that Texas has put together with the federal government and how they stepped up so many times when the Biden administration did not secure our border. Texas filled the gap. And when I was governor, I deployed my National Guard there to facilitate and help as well, as did other governors in the country, and did what we could to get by until we had a new president that truly cared about keeping America safe. There have not been any decided decisions on reimbursing states, but I know many of the governors have asked for it, and we've appreciated their help. And so that's an ongoing conversation with every new agreement or new ask we have of states. If we're asking them to commit to the 287G program, seeing what we can do to help meet their financial needs is incredibly important. If it's asking the National Guard to step up or even past spending that they've incurred, I know that President Trump is appreciative of the efforts and the partnerships and wants to continue those conversations.
Yeah, representing nearly half of the southern border, we've been ground zero for it. And Texas, but it's not just Texas. I mean, you mentioned your home state. Everyone has really pitched in a big way, and it's not fair. For the last 4 years, a lot of our states have been on our own and had to pay out of pocket. I think it's a great opportunity for the federal government to reimburse some of these states. I'm certainly committed to making sure Texas gets reimbursed for some of the funding we've done along the border. I'll tell you what, it was very difficult to get anything out of your predecessor every time he came before this committee, other than lying to us and saying the border was secured when we know it wasn't. One thing that we did get out, last year I submitted a letter to the ICE director asking him how many convicted criminal illegal aliens were in our country. And this is what I got back. This is literally part of his response. Your letter requested the number of non-citizens on ICE's docket convicted or charged with a crime. As of July 21st, 2024, there were 662,566 non-citizens with criminal histories on ICE's national docket. That was nearly a year ago. Do you by chance have any updated numbers on how many convicted criminal aliens we still have loose in the country?
We believe we have more than that and are continuing to do an assessment. And of course, every day we continue to see crimes in this country that are perpetuated by individuals that we didn't necessarily know that we are here. What I will tell you is that the president, under his leadership, has already arrested and is prosecuting and held accountable over 250 known terrorists, people who are on the known terrorist watch list. We have over 65,000 individuals that just ICE alone has arrested that are criminal aliens that are being held accountable for their crimes in our communities. We also talk extensively about different governors that we've been able to work with. Many of them have people within their facilities that have committed crimes that they've been arrested, and they're holding and detaining them. If they are illegals, many times they're facing their consequences in their jail and prison time before they can be returned to their country. So, these, by virtue of being in this country illegally, you are breaking the law and you are a criminal. And we've seen the previous administration pervert and manipulate their data and information to give us numbers that don't necessarily square with what the facts are on the ground. So there's many, many more criminals in this country, and we're going to continue to target and go after them to make sure that we're protecting families.
I tell you what, the last administration was terrible at transparency, and I think it's a great opportunity for President Trump, along with yourself and other secretaries, to just be transparent to the American public, show them what we're dealing with. Once again, when we got that number back, it was it's jaw dropping to see there. My last point, I only have 26 limited time left. Myself and Michael Guest, my good colleague from Mississippi, both sit on the Homeland authorizing side. We've been working very hard through reconciliation. One of the things that I would highlight for you, we talked about many things, is infrastructure, in particularly checkpoints. Checkpoints not necessarily along the border, but in our interior, both at the southern and the northern border, I think are very, very important. Please don't lose sight of that. In Eagle Pass in particular, that checkpoint is way outdated for the amount of traffic that's been in there. I'd flag that for you. Look forward to working together and chatting more on how we build this out.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes Mr. Guest from Mississippi.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, first I want to thank you, the men and women that you serve with, for the incredible success that you have been able to accomplish in just a short period of time. Just looking statistics, and I believe that is the greatest measure when we're looking at whether or not agencies are successful or not. Comparing statistics from one agency to the other, 1 year to the other, we know that last month CBP reported 11,017 encounters across the southwest border. Looking back a year, so March of 2024, under the Biden-Harris administration, 189,000. March of 23, 193,000. March of 2022, 222,000. So looking at just the metrics of what you and your men and women who serve with you have been able to accomplish, again, I believe is incredible. So when you leave here, please return to those men and women and thank them on behalf of all, not only the members of Congress, but all the people from across this great nation who are in gratitude for their continued service. As Representative Gonzalez said, he and I both serve also on the Authorizing Committee. And last week we were able to mark up legislation that included roughly $46 billion for additional walls, barriers along the southwest border. And I know that is something that, particularly between Republicans and Democrats, we have had a fundamental disagreement. And I would ask if you would just kind of take a moment to talk about the importance of the investment and walls and borders, barriers along the southwest border, and how that not only does that make our nation safer, but the importance that it is providing to the men and women who serve at CBP to make sure that they can better perform the duties that we've taxed them with.
Well, thank you for talking about the importance of having not just enforcing of our laws in this country, but also infrastructure and security procedures that give us a wall. And that wall may look different based on what the topography is or the geographical location in this country on our southern border, but also on our northern border. And then when you talk about our maritime borders as well, we can't neglect the fact that we have needs there and infrastructure that would help us make sure we know what's coming into this country, who's coming into this country, and if it's appropriate and if they should be. Since President Trump has been in office, we have installed 77.8 miles of new border. That includes steel bollard fencing, but it also includes temporary border and some waterborne as well. We have 11 contracts that have been awarded to put in over 40 miles of new border as well, and we still have 5 contracts that are pending. And I want to thank you for focusing resources to continue to make sure that we're building infrastructure and building in wall and making sure that we're having what we need for each area to address the concerns that are there. That border wall will be built that is steel in areas that it's appropriate for, but the other areas may require us to do buoys. If we do have, waterborne areas such as, the Rio Grande and places like that, that it is required, and then having technology and cameras and the ability to see distances where we may not have the ability to put in fencing and even concertina wire and panels that would be used and are putting in temporarily right now as well. So the diversity of what happens is incredibly important. We're addressing the needs as they see fit, but we're going to continue to move forward with putting up that infrastructure because it does slow down traffic, it sends a message, and it gives our CBP officers more opportunities to truly address the security concerns that we've had in the past.
And Madam Secretary, in the last roughly minute that I have, I want to address an issue that near and dear to my state. March the 15th, we had a series of tornadoes that came through Mississippi. Half a dozen individuals lost their lives that day. It impacted roughly 20 counties, so roughly a quarter of our state was impacted. Shortly after the storms, I, along with many of the other elected officials, we went and we visited those areas that were impacted, and I'll tell you that some of the damage has been extreme. Our governor and MEMA quickly requested disaster assistance, but at this point, the review of that process is still pending. And I understand that that takes time, and I don't want to rush anything. But I would ask you if you could make sure that you could do everything to expedite that request. It is impacting my local jurisdictions with debris cleanup. It is impacting people as they seek to recover. So I would just ask that you personally see if anything could be done to expedite that request. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I would yield back.
Yes.
Gentleman yields back.
Yes, I will certainly get back to you and follow up with that. I'm not sure if that decision is still with us or at the White House, but I will follow up with you. And I want to thank you for talking about the fact that you're sitting there waiting for the federal government to respond. President Trump's heart is with the American people and recognizes they don't deserve that. If we had the ability to give resources to a state so they could respond in a more timely manner and do a better job than where the federal government has failed, it would be entirely appropriate. So thank you for that, and I'll follow up with you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary. The chair now recognizes the gentlelady from Iowa, Mrs. Henson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, Madam Secretary. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your commitment to getting Homeland Security back to mission. You know, we saw such a straying from that in the previous administration, and President Trump's border security promises were really delivered on day one and continue to be executed on. So I just want to say thank you for that. Under your leadership, those illegal encounters at our southern border are dropping to historic lows. Our immigration laws are finally being enforced. The border wall is back under construction. DHS is finally working again on protecting the homeland. No new laws, but we have a new president and a new secretary, so I want to say thank you. Last year, before this committee, Secretary Mayorkas at the time came before us, pushing the Biden administration's $4.7 billion Southwest Border Contingency Fund. All that really was a slush fund, we know, designed to bypass Congress and bankroll those failed policies and sanctuary cities doing their bidding. He claimed it was to manage surges, but those surges were of their own doing, sending a clear signal to illegal immigrants, the traffickers, the cartels, that our border was open for business for them. That wasn't enforcement, that was actual chaos at our southern border by the taxpayers' dime. So I see that as just one of the many blatant attempts for Secretary Mayorkas at the time and President Biden to misuse those taxpayer dollars intentionally without accountability. But again, under President Trump and your leadership, we have reversed course there. Programs like the Shelter and Services Program that enabled that abuse have been gutted, and their funding is now going to real border enforcement. So I'd like to drill down a little bit, Madam Secretary, on the misuse of those dollars under the last administration. Can you walk us through some of the specific programs or activities under the Biden administration that enabled this crisis and how you've worked to unwind those programs?
Well, it was the Shelter and Services Program, which you referenced specifically. Those dollars were taken and manipulated to facilitate illegal activity and housing for illegal aliens and criminals that were in this country, and gave them a place to set up shop and to conduct their trafficking, their drug dealing, and also their crimes against their communities that they live in. A prime example is the Roosevelt Hotel in New York City. Filled with hundreds and hundreds of illegal aliens, many of them criminals, part of foreign terrorist organizations such as TDA, and in fact, Laken Riley's killer stayed there, and paid for by the American taxpayer, courtesy of Joe Biden, and those who supported him and his leadership in this country. That's what we're working to address, is to make sure that those dollars are no longer continue to be used in such a manner, and that programs like that have been misused are used for ways that secure this country and really follow through on what the mission of the Department of Homeland Security is. And that's to keep the American homeland safe and secure and to protect our communities. We have many of the grants and different dollars that we have out there being reevaluated. We're also utilizing several different programs and working with other different cabinet secretaries to make sure that our housing programs, our food assistance programs, our shelter services programs, even programs within other agencies, that if people are illegals and that it wasn't the authority of Congress and never the determining decision by Congress to make them be people who took advantage of those programs or to have access to them, that was ended. That no longer was this president going to allow money to be diverted different than what was authorized to be utilized to facilitate people who are in this country illegally and breaking our laws.
And you mentioned the number on the terror watch list already held accountable, 250, and we know there are more, and I think that Americans need to understand you are doing that work to help keep us safe, apprehend these dangerous people that were just let to roam free in our country. I certainly, as a Midwest mom, like you, understand that we need to prioritize that and make sure you have the resources necessary for detention beds as well as the enforcement side. So as we work through fiscal year 26, the considerations that we need to be taking a look at and reconciliation as well, what additional authorities or potential congressional actions do you see as necessary to making sure you can execute on your mission?
I would say the Department of Homeland Security is one of the largest agencies in the federal government, but has one of the smallest budgets. And it really is about when you look at what you're doing for fiscal year 26, and when you're looking at the reconciliation package, is to really determine where your priorities are, where Congress's priorities are. What is the responsibility of the federal government? What did our founders task us with as far as ensuring for the American people, and what rights did he remain with the people and with the state? And every decision that gets made here should be facilitated through that lens to make sure we're spending money appropriately. I always say, and have said for many, many years, no matter what topic comes up, what program, what agency, there's always going to be lobbyists who show up. There's very few people who show up in the room to lobby for the American taxpayer. And the job that you do in oversight is incredibly important. And I come to this role today not only as a wife and a mom and a grandma, but also as a business owner, someone who's been an employee for many different people, served in Congress, served in our legislature, but also as governor. And people need leadership that recognizes what the priorities are. And so every different component that I have under my responsibility, we are putting back on mission and making sure that they are fulfilling the duties to which they were created. So thank you for considering the reconciliation package. It will be considering the amount of people that are in this country illegally, many of them perpetuating crimes. We need the resources to continue doing what President Trump has promised the American people, to get these individuals out of our country and make sure that they come into our country, if they self-deport when they come back, that they do so the right way, and that they can be a part of the American dream in the future.
Thank you again to you and President Trump for redirecting those resources where they are intended to go. Really appreciate that. And Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Chair now recognizes for second round the ranking member from Illinois, Ms. Underwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Noem, you've designated the Army's 250th birthday parade in Washington, D.C. on June 14th as a national special security event, meaning DHS will use taxpayer funding to help with enhanced security and support. June 14th is also President Trump's 79th birthday. At the same time that this administration is canceling critical cybersecurity and disaster recovery funding under the guise of so-called waste and abuse, it's being publicly reported that this event will involve a full military presence crossing the Potomac from the Pentagon to Constitution Avenue. We recently received your fiscal year 2025 spend plans for the Secret Service, but the costs for this event were not included. What do you estimate you'll be spending on this, and how do you plan to pay for it?
I can get those details and get back to you. I don't have them with me today, but I will certainly take that as a follow-up to your question.
Okay. Do you plan to designate NSSEs for the birthdays of other branches of our armed services that do not share their birthday with the president, but also happen to be celebrating their 250th anniversaries in 2025?
I will look and work with the administration and with the different departments and agencies to identify what would be appropriate for all of those, and we'll continue to keep you updated on that as well.
Now I want to focus on CISA for a moment. America is under constant and growing threat from cyber criminals and foreign adversaries, as we're still seeing with Salt Typhoon. Last week you said we should, quote, just wait for the president's grand cyber plan. But you have not waited to erode the department's cyber defense capabilities by removing resources and personnel from CISA and other components. Meanwhile, bad actors are burrowing further into the critical infrastructure of this country. On what date can we expect to receive the president's cyber plan, and why are you moving forward now with workforce reductions and other changes to relevant DHS components without it?
Yeah, CISA's mission is to hunt and harden and to work with our state and local entities on critical infrastructure. So to support cybersecurity infiltrations that would happen from enemies and bad actors when it comes to electrical grids, water systems, support those states, those small and medium-sized businesses that can't afford that kind of defense system themselves, and to go and walk alongside of them. I think one of the most alarming things that I heard when I was first nominated for this position, but before I was sworn in, I got briefings from CISA and from the leadership team and the people that were there. And one of the things that they shared with me was that they were aware of Salt Typhoon and Volt Typhoon, but they didn't know necessarily how they had happened yet or how to stop them into the future. That was alarming to me. It was alarming to me that we had the nation's top leading cybersecurity agency that didn't know how to stop the PRC and our enemies from coming in and hacking into our systems. And if we think a pandemic was scary, wait until the PRC in China comes in and shuts down our electricity.
Obviously.
And
So
our
when are we
water.
getting
So
the president's cyber plan?
That is what CISA is focusing on, is making sure that we're approaching cybersecurity from the importance that it is.
I had a direct
All we've-
question.
Yes.
Do you know when the president's cyber plan will be released?
It will be coming out shortly, and that is the president's prerogative.
Okay.
I have been
Thank you.
advising him on what
Thank
that
you.
will look like.
Despite the
and
growing
when we will
cyber
get it.
threats, your budget cuts nearly $500 million, $500 million from the main agency charged with protecting our federal networks and so much more. So if you are so outraged by the threat of the PRC and our federal networks, why are you cutting $500 million? When you recently spoke at the RSA conference, you said that we needed to put CISA, quote, back on mission. But let's be clear, that mission is designated for you. We in the Congress told you in the department and CISA how to execute on that mission. And you all have been moving money away from CISA, and that does not help achieve that mission. Lastly, Secretary, as a nurse, I have always prioritized taking care of the health of our DHS workforce and giving them the tools that they need to do their jobs, not just physically, but mentally. DHS has made great strides in recent years here with popular programs that provide personnel and their families with the resources that they need and the support for the mental health of our agents and officers. I hope that these programs can continue for fiscal year 2026. And I'm curious if you agree that this is a priority for the department, and will we see continued funding for it in the budget request?
Absolutely, we will continue to focus on the priorities of the healthcare needs of all of our employees.
Great. Well, although we disagree on many other issues, I hope that taking care of the hardworking men and women at DHS can be an area of shared values and bipartisan success, and I'm looking forward to working on them together. I yield back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. The floor belongs to the gentlelady from Connecticut, the ranking member of the Appropriations Committee, who got here as quick as she could. Thank you, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. My God, this is twice in one day here, so it's great to see you. We're hearing hopping here. Thank you so much, and I want to thank the ranking member Underwood for holding the hearing today, and welcome to you, Madam Secretary, and thank you for appearing before the subcommittee today. I just want to begin with a message to your workforce, if I might, and that's I'm grateful, very grateful for the work that they do, from search and rescue efforts of the Coast Guard to our first responders around the ground after natural disasters to those keeping us safe in the air and on the ground and at sea. I want to start with some big picture questions because I think we know very little of the details about where the $646 million cuts within FEMA's grant programs will come from. It is no secret that there are numerous reports of you, if we need to correct the record, stating that you want to, quote, eliminate FEMA within the Department of Homeland Security. I'm concerned about the direction that the administration is taking with regard to FEMA, canceling programs like BRIC, a program enacted into law by President Trump in his first term without any evidence of waste, fraud, and abuse, alongside the freezing of grants, and now 2026 budget requests targeting even more of FEMA's resources. And just right now, in terms of looking at the cancellations, the Science and Technology Directorates, Centers of Excellence, and Office of University Programs, as I mentioned, the FEMA-administered grant programs frozen virtually all grant obligations pending a review as it determines whether it will try to choke off funding for unacceptable political reasons. Resources for states and communities to respond to disasters, secure firefighting equipment, protect against terrorism, secure our ports, and much more is being held up. And as I mentioned, the cancellation of the BRIC program, funding to support hazard mitigation, reduce the toll of future disasters, save lives. That money's not going out. Research has shown mitigation efforts like BRIC save a minimum of $6 for every dollar invested and save more than double when including mitigation of economic impacts. So federal disaster relief should be readily available across the United States, regardless of where you live. Natural disasters happen everywhere. They should not be concerned about the federal government turning their back on them when they need the help the most. We need to give constituents what they need when they're facing tragedy, that they will not be stranded due to political discord. My ask of you is, what is your plan with regard to FEMA? Are you planning to eliminate FEMA? Your testimony references that you want to, quote, eliminate dysfunction of the current agency. I'm unclear, I don't know if my colleagues are clear on what you mean by dysfunction. And I'm concerned that you're causing more dysfunction within the workforce that should be preparing itself for the pending hurricane season.
Well, thank you for your question and the discussion on this topic today. President Trump has been very clear since the beginning that he believes that FEMA and its response in many, many circumstances has failed the American people. And that FEMA, as it exists today, should be eliminated and empowering states to respond to disasters with federal government
If you'll just,
support.
with all due respect, where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA? I don't know about everybody else on this. My state, Connecticut, was hit very, very hard with Superstorm Sandy. Every community in some way or another has been hit by that. And the FEMA on the ground, people come in, work with the families, deal with getting the funding out. Where is the evidence of the failure of FEMA?
Congresswoman, we still have claims open from Hurricane Katrina. We have fire claims that are still unpaid to people who said they were due them 7 to 8 to 10 years old. They have never been paid by FEMA. So one of the worst things that the federal government can do is to stand up in front of the American public and say, we will be there, we will walk alongside you in the most horrible time of your life, and then never follow through on it.
Well, that's
what
not-
the president has said is he's sick and tired of federal agencies that pick and choose who wins and who loses. He wants to make sure that the federal government's commitment, when it makes a commitment, that it follows through. So he's going to empower states.
The federal government is
local-
abdicating its commitment to the American people who find
It did
themselves.
certainly under Joe Biden's administration. But now President Trump's going to make
Let me
sure
just say this
that
to you. The
communities are
Office
ready
of
for
Professional
disasters.
Responsibility. The Office of Professional, because I knew you were going to go there. As you know, FEMA's Office of Professional Responsibility, under the Biden administration, there was no evidence, no direction or agency or field leadership to discriminate against disaster victims based on political
I'll
affiliation,
give you all
which
the
was a
evidence you
charge.
need. I'll follow up with you.
Well,
get
and
you
I will
those
follow
down.
up. I will follow up, and I follow up with my colleagues, quite frankly, and to really listen to people whose states, communities have been devastated, and what role FEMA has played. I don't know how many millions and millions of dollars went out in Louisiana. Actually, I've asked my staff to calculate that when Katrina hit, and the response was overwhelming. And the response has been overwhelming. If you want to make corrections, that's fine. We all agree with that.
Yeah, we can point to thousands and thousands of
Well,
instances where
if you wouldn't
FEMA
mind getting
was
this
timely
committee,
and
if you
responsive
wouldn't
to
mind
people.
getting this committee,
Unfortunately.
the information and the evidence where you talk about the dysfunction of the agency and where it has really failed, that would be important to those of us who are, are appropriating dollars. And it would appear that the administration overall has a way in which they're looking at dismantling the federal government. The states will never have the amount of money because the federal government isn't going to pass that money to the states to be able to deal with what happens. It's when the federal government comes in and be able to give a hand to do that. And I think it's very clear from what you said that both yourself and the president really want to dismantle the federal government and the agencies that have provided service to the American people for decades. I thank the chair for your time and yield back.
Thank you, Madam Ranking Member. Mr. Rutherford, the floor is yours for round two.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, as a sheriff and first responder in the state of Florida, we've had many hurricanes, and FEMA has come in and assisted. But I can tell you in the state of Florida, we pretty much handle those events through our regional domestic security task forces. One of the problems that we have with FEMA, and we've even talked about it up here, is how do we get FEMA to pay the bills that are due, and instead of cities and states having to pay the interest on all of that money for years. So those are some of the areas where I know the frustration levels are off the chart. And so that's one of the things I'd love to work with the folks across the aisle on is let's address these things because it's not FEMA shows up and everything's okay. It's quite the contrary, actually. So, but I do want to ask about this. In your written statement, you mentioned the designation, the administration's designation of the 6 cartels and 2 transnationals as terrorist organizations. And these FTOs, foreign terrorist organizations, that designation is critically important. And I know a lot of discussion has been had about CISA, but can you talk just a little bit about, to put some minds at ease, I think, how is it that this designation, sorry about that.
You're good.
But how this designation actually helps with the administration being able to work, sharing information between the civilian and the military to actually go after these folks who are killing our citizens with their drugs. I think it was 23. We had over 107,000 Americans die of poisoning coming across the southern border. They're also looking to weaponize drones to be used against our law enforcement officers at the southern border. They're the ones helping to finance all of this, or were financing all this mass migration. That designation, I think, is critically important, and I don't think people appreciate it enough. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, certainly, Congressman, and thank you for the question, because it is critically important what President Trump has done by defining exactly who these people are and what these organizations do and what they're trying to do to the United States of America. By designating these gangs and cartel members as foreign terrorist organizations, it allows us in a new way to partner law enforcement activities and consequences in partnership with other cabinet areas within the federal government, including the Department of Defense, all military branches underneath that, as well coordination, sharing of information, and how a whole of government approach to how we conduct enforcement operations. It also gives us an opportunity to access background information, criminal records that we need and that we can share internationally as well. And clearly, when you look at the cartels and their activity, their partnership and their facilitation of other countries and their software, their technology to launder money for the Chinese, the PRC businesses that are out there that are seeking to destroy the United States of America, that partnership that they have built over the years and the sophistication to which they operate, we have to be prepared for. We have to recognize what they are, what level they're at, how they're continuing to recruit members and affiliates, and how more and more dangerous they get to be the longer that they operate in the United States without consequences. So that partnership that we have with the Department of Defense, our military and all branches, but then also bringing all of the authorities of the President of the United States to the table to go after these criminal organizations, really recognizes them for what they are. They are terrorists. They are perpetuating terror and fear in our communities, and we have to make sure that we take them out now.
Yeah, they're not just drug organizations.
Correct.
anymore.
Correct.
Thank
They
you
are
very
laundering
much,
money,
Madam.
trafficking individuals, killing our children. And I've said this for many years about China. China doesn't just steal our IP, manipulate their currency, build up their military to someday have a conflict with the United States of America. They're systematically killing our next generation of Americans. They're
Killed over
using a
60,000 just with
poison,
fentanyl.
yes, to infiltrate our country and to kill off our young
Thank you very
Americans,
much.
knowing it weakens us far into the future.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Rutherford. Mr. Cuellar, floor is yours for 5 minutes for a second round.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, let me go back to the basics of what I think are needed. We talked about Carrizo Cane River roads, but there's also, in the middle of the river, there are islands. And I got them in the Laredo area, I got them in the Stark County. I don't know if my colleagues have. The bad guys will come in and use those islands and then jump over. We've talked to the International Boundary Water Commission and our Border Patrol folks. That's one area that we ought to focus on to get rid of those islands, and it'd be better for the flow so the river water can go down there to other places. So islands is in the middle of the island, of the areas. The other thing is buoys. Actually, years ago, I brought it up to Border Patrol, but I said, as long as you talk to the International Boundary Water Commission, so it can be okay. I know the state of Texas had one, but it was like a quarter of a mile, and the river is 1,200 miles, so it's like a stamp in the middle of a football field. So we got to look at areas that they will be necessary if we use that, but as long as the International Boundary Water Commission is involved. Retirement, I'll go back to the retirement. It's another committee that's looking at this retirement, but there will be, to be exact, 2,325 Border Patrol agents that will be eligible to retire this year. They're looking at that change. Depending what they do, the other committee, we could lose a lot of folks by the end of the year. So we got to make sure that the other committees are working with you. I would say also that you said that recruitment is up 50%, but we got to close the deal. That is actually hire the Border Patrol agents. And one of the big problems is the polygraph. The polygraph exam is the biggest problem to hiring Border Patrol agents on that, and we can follow up on that particular issue. Port technology, not only in between, but at the ports, 86% of the people that are caught at checkpoints and at the ports of entry are not illegals. They're actually U.S. citizens, according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission. So we got to put the technology also at the port of entries so we can move legitimate trade and commerce. Playing defense on the 20-yard line, I've been talking about this, and I think y'all are doing some of that. I'd rather play defense on the 20-yard line with Mexico, Guatemala, and the other places than our 1-yard line. There is language that we have proposed, but without due respect, the prior administration was not interested in this, but there's language that can give you certain authorities where you can play more on the 20-yard line, which is, again, because more people we stop over there, less people will come to our border itself. Technology, I know that we've talked about technology, but the drone threat is very real. In fact, just to let you know, a couple of weeks ago, a Border Patrol drone in the Laredo sector was taken down by the cartel operators, which means that cartels now have technology that can take down law enforcement drones. And they do the surveillance. They know what we're doing. And by the time we get through our procurement process to get our drones, years are going. They don't have any procurement rules. They just go to Best Buy and buy all the Best Buys, and they just use off-the-shelf things. So, I hope we can look at that technology also. The other thing is, again, and I'm sorry, I've been communicating with the Border Patrol unions on this, that the dead zones that we talked about, it is a real problem. It is a real problem. There are areas where they can't even talk and communicate. So those dead zones are very important. Finally, I think it was brought up, the infrastructure. Let's not forget about the basic infrastructure, and I'm talking about checkpoints, Eagle Pass, Freer, Laredo, and I know we've already put $15 million they're doing on designing the Laredo one. That checkpoint, because Laredo's the largest inland port, but if that checkpoint was a port of entry, it would be the 4th largest port in the whole country. The reason we had a problem where some migrants died on those trailers is because Border Patrol will look, and if the lines are a mile long, they will just wave them, and the bad guys have an idea where to put them. So they wave that trailer with the migrants that died in San Antonio. So checkpoints like Mr. Gonzalez has mentioned, the basic stuff is very, very important. Finally, I'll close up with a border wall. On the border wall, again, I think you said we're appropriate, which is important. The state of Texas, I've always said, don't condemn, but maybe if you look at the possibility of leasing, the state of Texas put it in the law, don't condemn land, but you go ahead and you ease them. And now there are landowners that preempted the federal government because the state will lease out and not condemn itself on that. So I can go on a border wall for a long time, but keep in mind that the largest, and I'll close with this point, the largest amount of people that got here before this last flow were visa overstays. And by the way, the biggest violator was Canada. Not asking for a wall with Canada, but it was visa overstays, especially from Canada. So we just got to look at data-driven solutions and look forward to working with you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Congressman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Washington State, Mr. Newhouse, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I get cut off by the gentleman from Nevada, if I talk too long, I will. No, I just wanted to extend an invitation to you, Madam Secretary, to come out to my district to visit the Spokane border sector as well as the Orville station and also inland Washington. But we have a Coast Guard navigation team in Kennewick, so
Fantastic.
as sharing border states. It would be a good thing for you to see. I just wanted to say one thing. The recent skinny budget proposed notable cuts to CISA, as you've heard many of my colleagues mention several times. I just wanted to mention that last summer and in March, I believe, CISA provided some farmers and ranchers in my district a briefing and training on protecting food from farm to table with cybersecurity and protective emphasis workshop. And I just wanted to encourage you to look at that. I think it was very well received, and I think it would be a good thing for a program to continue using. Let me ask about sanctuary jurisdictions. I believe state and local partnerships truly are important for the agents and the officers at DHS to execute their mission. How have sanctuary jurisdictions or state or municipal governments hindered the agency's mission to protect the homeland?
Well, I would say every day it is thwarting our efforts to be able to go out and help make our communities safe and secure. There have been times where we've gone out and targeted bad actors and criminals in communities that are guilty of rape, murder, violence, domestic abuse, drug trafficking, human trafficking. And when we've gone in to do those operations, we have not had the backup of local law enforcement. We've not able to have leaders that have walked alongside of us in support of securing their communities and been there for ICE agents that are out there putting their lives on the line to help secure and get these bad criminals off their streets. And those individuals are protecting them with their decisions, their political rhetoric. They're also filing lawsuits against us and the authorities that we're exercising to try to jam us up in court rather than giving us the opportunity to go out there and really follow through on what our commitment has been to this country. So the sanctuary jurisdictions have been fighting this administration in trying to do what the American people asked President Trump to do in November, and that was to make their communities safe again. I will tell you that when I've been out on the front lines with many of these agents, when they've been doing operations in the early morning sweeping up criminals, they are doing the hard work and many times in partnership with local law enforcement in cities. So we appreciate that partnership and where we can get it. In sanctuary cities, it becomes much more of an operation that has to have more people. We have to commit more ICE agents, more federal officers there because the local community has not, and the leadership there has not been supportive. And then also, I would say it makes it more dangerous. We have seen violence against our ICE officers go up over 300%. And I think that's because of the rhetoric out there by local mayors and governors who have, put out misinformation and perpetuated lies about law enforcement and what they're trying to do to help communities. I remember the morning I was in New York City, we were conducting ICE operations on known criminals that were guilty of violent abuses and breaking the law. We had community members that were walking by on the street that were taking their kids to school, and when they would walk by, they would say, "Thank you. Thank you for being here."
That says
Yet
a
their
lot.
leadership
Says a lot.
was not there to support and back up our operations. So I would ask people in these communities to challenge their mayors, challenge their governors to come to the table and to help us, because I don't know of anybody who wanted to raise their kids in a community that was filled with criminals, where it wasn't safe to go out at night and where they couldn't walk their kids to school and not have to worry about if they were going to get there safely.
Thank you. I'm going to switch topics really quick in the short amount of time we have left. Tariffs.
Yes.
We both come from agricultural states. I fully recognize the importance of tariffs to help level the playing field and provide a fair opportunity for our producers to compete on world market. But I also remember in 2018, retaliatory tariffs on agricultural products, which felt the brunt of those efforts. Could you talk just a little bit, if I could, without putting you, it's not a gotcha question, but I just wanted to express the concern that agriculture doesn't need any more challenges right now. Could you talk a little bit about some of the conversations maybe that you're having at the executive level about retaliation?
Yeah, thank you for that. I've worked on food policy for 30 years. So I not only am a farmer and a rancher, but I immediately started working on state and federal programs, and I recognized that our food policy in this country is a national security issue. And keeping farmers out on the land, producing our food, is imperative to making sure that we can feed ourselves. And another country doesn't control us by controlling our food supply. So President Trump recognizes this, and we've spoken for hours about the importance of having farmers here in this country growing our food and having many farmers, not allowing just one or two big companies or conglomerates control that supply, because it makes food affordable and available to every single American. The President Trump, if you remember back during that period of time, was there for farmers. He helped them with assistance when those retaliatory tariffs came into place. And he recognizes that this negotiation that we're having now with these countries has to happen to level the playing field. We've been treated unfairly in trade agreements for many, many years. When I was in Congress, I served on the Ways and Means Committee, which many people refer to as the committee that has the most ways it can be mean, because it has taxes and trade and tariffs and all the different jurisdictions as far as what can happen. But I would say specifically, working on trade agreements while I was there, I recognized how we could come to a trade agreement and facilitate that. But then we also would, as soon as our shipments of soybeans hit the shores of China, they would reject it for different sanctions or regulations such as sanitary or phytosanitary reasons, and would manipulate how they interpreted those agreements and didn't adhere to them anyways. So President Trump is all in to make sure that we rectify the wrongs of the past and make sure that we're treated fairly and get our jobs back home here in America. So far, CBP has collected over $32 billion worth of tariffs since April 2nd has gone into place. And they've adjusted and done that, and these countries are feeling the pain enough that they're coming to the table and having negotiations with this administration to make sure that we're treated fairly and our farmers and ranchers are treated fairly in the future.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. I will yield back.
You don't have any time to yield back.
I know,
Thank you.
sorry.
The gentlelady from Hawaii, the floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Texas.
Texas. Well, you know, it went so long.
Not
you
even
might wanna double
close,
check that.
Chairman.
There might be an ocean coming there from a different direction. The
There
floor
might
is yours for 5 minutes for follow-up questions, as long as they're not like Mr. Newhouse's. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Madam Secretary, I have a question related to something more close to home for me in the community in El Paso with DHS employees. For decades, CBP employees who work at our land ports of entry have been contractually allowed by CBP to have an off-site location for their union. And this off-site location is completely funded by union dues, not by taxpayer money. And again, this was something agreed to in their contract. I was shocked and alarmed to learn that they were told by DHS they could no longer be off-site, and they were forced to come into a DHS facility in El Paso. It's a conference room, media training room. So that part of their contract, that longstanding agreement, was violated in my eyes. Are you aware of this at all?
I have heard about it, but I don't know the details of that agreement, so I can follow up with you and get that back to you. And if you would lay out the concerns for being co-located, I think that would be fantastic for me to know.
We will. We'll make sure to communicate with your team. Would love to work with you on this. The same has not been true for the Border Patrol Union. So there's disparate treatment, and additionally, just to very quickly lay out why it's important for union members to be able to speak to their union leaders in private, and being located in a small conference room, media training room, offers no privacy. There are other issues, but I look forward to working with you on that.
I do know that the difference in the two unions is important, and I'll look into how those were interpreted. And I also know that the one union is located under the Treasury Union as well, and that defines some requirements and for how it's regulated and set out going forward. So I'll see if that is the determining factor on why there was a difference in how the locations were determined.
And I would ask, Madam Secretary, that you please allow the El Paso Union to continue to be housed off-site. It is their preference, doesn't impact the budget or appropriations. They pay for it. So I don't see a reason why this long-standing, decades-long situation should be changed. So would ask for your support for that, please.
I'll look into it.
Okay, perfect. I also wanted to ask you about this NBC News story, and I'll enter into the record this article as well. U.S. citizen family traumatized after ICE raided their Oklahoma home in search of someone else. And according to the local affiliate, KFOR, which was reporting on this story, immigration agents raided the home last week. They had a search warrant for the home, but the suspects listed on the warrant were no longer living in the home. The family was forced to wait outside in the rain during the search. A mother and her girls, all U.S. citizens. Their money was taken, their laptop, their cell phone. I asked you at the top of our first round if you believed it was important for DHS and if you would attest to the fact that DHS needs to rectify any mistakes. If this were a mistake, will you ensure that this family, this U.S. citizen family, gets its property back in a timely manner?
Well, in that particular situation, the warrant for that situation was on the house and the facility, not on the individuals that were there. And so that house was being used for human smuggling. And so those operations were conducted against the facility. And even in that situation, there was some individuals there with the same last names and some of the similarities.
But
And
if
so
it were a
we're-
mistake,
we are
Madam
continuing-
Secretary,
we
if it
believe
were a
everything was
mistake.
done appropriately, and we'll continue to make sure that it is done and handled appropriately.
All right. Well, appreciate you looking into it. That not my constituents, but you had mentioned in your testimony, and you've said previously, that the focus of your agency is to go after the worst of the worst, people who are here illegally. But we have seen reporting and spoken to individuals, we meaning Congress, that in fact, there have been abuses on that front. People with legal protections have been deported. I laid out in the first round U.S. citizen children. I don't know, and I asked, and you said you'd get back to me about whether parents actually filled out the ICE forms that are normally used for those processes. U.S. citizen families with nothing to do with human trafficking, and now DHS employees as well, in my view, have been subjected to an abuse of power. And we all swore an oath to the Constitution. This is a democratic republic. Rule of law is important, due process is important, and ultimately that will be my North Star, not just in this hearing, but throughout everything that I work on as a member of Congress. I thank you, Madam Secretary, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
I want to thank the member, and I want you to know that during the course of your questioning, we have moved your district back into Texas. Everything's good.
My flight is shorter now as a result. Thank you.
I was just hoping you weren't paying attention. I thought the folks out on the islands could use some help, but we'll go on from there. Mr. Siscomani, the floor is yours for your second round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary, so the first set of questions that I had were more on the security side. I want to shift gears a little bit. Matter of fact, I just guided a group of freshman members on the Republican side to the border in Arizona with the intention that they see the full picture of the border. We have obviously the security aspect that has been key as central to the conversation, that we have trade and commerce at the border, and we've got immigration as well going on. So it's important that I think my colleagues and everyone that is maybe not from a border district can understand that there's a lot more that happens at the border than just one aspect of it. I call it the three buckets of the conversation around the border. So with that in mind, that as an immigrant myself, I know how complex the immigration system is. I became a citizen in 2006, And then 16 years later, I became a member of Congress. No other country in the world will give you that opportunity. I believe in the American dream and fighting for that American dream that so many people still seek. There's been much media attention again on the increase in deportations and removal of aliens, which I remain fully supportive of. That being said, I think we should also be highlighting and incentivizing those who are going through the process legally and those that are seeking to come to the country through the legal channels, and make that process less burdensome in order to disincentivize the use of cartels and bad actors. In my family's experience, it took us 13 years from the moment we came into the U.S. to the moment we became U.S. citizens. There have to be some improvements around these guidelines. So can you speak on how your budget request will facilitate easier legal pathways for potential immigrants?
Yeah, absolutely. And you've correctly identified part of the problem that we've had in this country for many, many years is that it takes far too long for a person to legally come through our immigration process and to become a U.S. citizen. And that needs to be fixed, and that was broken when I was here on the Hill, and it was broken when I was governor, and I still see as the Department of Homeland Security Secretary that is an issue that needs to be solved. We need to make sure that we're getting more immigration judges. I've been having conversations with our Attorney General, Pam Bondi, and with the Department of Justice on what we can do to get more judges to the table so that we can process not just backlogged claims, but illegal applications to come to this country as well, and then more immigration courts. So when you look at not just the fiscal year 26 request, but also reconciliation dollars, it is to address the needs that we have to address the invasion, secure the border, to make sure that our ICE officers have enough backup, help, equipment, and tools going forward to make sure that we're addressing what has happened here criminally and illegally, but also addressing within our other agencies what we can do to make sure that we're processing those legal applications and getting that taken care of. President Trump is determined to do that, and we have that addressed in the budget request from the different cabinet secretaries and agencies to make sure we have the resources to start getting after that backlog.
Excellent, excellent. You know, on the same topic of when we look at immigration and we look at workforce as well, those are very much attached. I just had Secretary Lori Chavez-Dreamer in Tucson yesterday. We visited different sites that work on this. We spoke at length about the need for more robust workforce programs and ways to ensure that workforce needs meet our communities' needs. Still, the utmost constant thing I hear from industry of what they need is workforce. Can you speak to any plans the administration has to create additional avenues to meet these through immigration, potentially?
So you're talking about meeting workforce needs?
Yeah,
as far as
workforce
through
needs,
visas and green
yeah.
cards? You know, I would say that the president recognizes the value in what we've had in programs in the past, but also recognized how they've been misused. And how Congress many times lays their prerogative on how many are authorized, how many are directed through law, that the Secretary has the latitude to issue, and will continue to work with you to find solutions that really meet the needs that we have in this country. You know, the President believes that we have a workforce here that deserves jobs, that pay very well with benefits and a future here in the United States of America, but also that we need to continue to keep the American dream open for immigrants who want to come here legally. So having the opportunity to make sure we're doing thorough vetting of people and partnering with other countries and having access to their background checks to make sure they can participate in our visa programs is very important. And as long as we have the ability to do that and continue to know who's coming here, why they're here, and if they have the opportunity to become citizens, then it's something that would be a benefit to this country if the president recognizes that the need is there.
I think that's very well put. I think having that balance always of making sure our border is secure, we know who's coming in, that opens the door and allows us to focus on the immigration system that works for the people coming in, but primarily for our citizens and what the country needs. And that has to do with workforce as well. So with that, thank you so much for partnering with us on that and finding multiple solutions to this problem in different areas at the same time is not easy, but you're doing a masterful job. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
And with that, I yield back, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for not, or Vice Chairman, for not challenging the Dan Newhouse Award. And now I'd like to recognize the gentleman from, oh, she's gone, from Texas. Mr. Gonzalez, the floor is yours for a second round.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Madam Secretary. Some could argue you have one of the toughest jobs in Washington, right? We had Elon show up with 2 hats. Maybe you should have shown up with 3 hats, right? Part of DHS that I worry about is it's a Swiss Army knife of the federal government. It seems like everything is in there. And we alluded to this earlier. How did DHS start? It started after 9/11 when Islamic extremists murdered Americans. And so I worry. We covered a lot of topics today. And I know the border gets a lot of attention, and I know there's a lot going on in the cyberspace. But I think back to some of the fundamentals. And I think back to 9/11, and I worry. I go, I look ahead, and I see, the World Cup coming our way, and I see the Olympics coming our way. I want us to make sure that we're not only focused on today, but we're also focused on tomorrow. Please keep that at the forefront of it. At the end of the day, right now we're feeding tomahawks to Houthis every day in Yemen, and it reminds me a whole lot of pre-9/11, right? I spent 5 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. No one knew about Al-Qaeda. No one knew where Afghanistan was on a map. It's very eerily similar, and the American people are really counting on you to make sure we're safe. On that note, DHS has lost its way over the last course of the last several years in their last administration, and I want to flag for you an office in particular, the Office of Immigration Detention Ombudsman. I mean, this was literally an office funded by taxpayer dollars that had billboards up that, and I quote, said throughout Texas, said, "Your brother in immigration custody has rights. We're here to help." I mean, it's complete nonsense. And once again, where are our taxpayer dollars going? So as you're off to a very fast start, much appreciated. But as you're going through these and you're tackling these different, please look at that program. I know in our fiscal year 25 budget, we zeroed that out, but unfortunately we couldn't get that over the finish line. So I'd ask for you to really take a look at that.
Congressman, we have looked at that already. We have recognized the abuses that happened, and many times that office was perpetuated on suing themselves and coming up with ways to cost the taxpayer more and more money. So we've put them back to what the size that they should be and addressed how it was misused and abused, and will continue to do so into the future to make sure that that isn't weaponized against the American people in the future.
Thank you for that. And I also want to thank you for something that is working. These HSI-led task forces work. You've seen it all throughout the country. It's how do we pool our resources? This isn't a federal issue. It isn't a state issue. It isn't a local issue. It's all of us. We're all in on this together. And in my experience, those task forces really work. So when it comes to funding, when it comes to legislation, once again, please, if you would, they're working. I'm hearing it from constituents all over the country. My good friend Juan Ciscomani, I know it's working in Arizona. It's certainly working in Texas. And then the other thing I want to mention is Stone Garden funding. Once again, this is something, it's an area that I believe is a force multiplier. It gives funding to our local law enforcement that are acting in the immigration space. This works. One of the issues that I see is sometimes it's a little too stringent. It's a little too, it almost like the federal government is discouraging local law enforcement from being involved. Maybe that's something we can tackle together. I'd love to hear your ideas, not now, but as you work through things on how we can, once again, make sure that our programs are working for the American people, not against us.
I agree. Yeah, I think that'd be fantastic. I've heard it's a highly effective program, and if there's ways to get more participants and streamline.
Chairman, I yield back my minute of time.
Thank you.
Thank you for being a leader. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the entire committee with an excellent sense of patience. The gentlelady from Connecticut, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member. Madam Secretary, earlier this year, the administration unveiled a thinly veiled propaganda ad about border security. It's about $200 million paid for by American taxpayers, I might add. And the ads are supposedly about border security, but honestly, if you see the ad, it's like a political ad, and all of us know what political ads look like. Even the conservative Cato Institute says the ads are a perfect example of wasteful government spending that DOGE should cut. I also might add that, and this is a direct quote, And Madam Secretary, it says that earlier this year that President Trump had instructed you on how to fashion the campaign. He said, and again I quote, "I want you in the ads. I want your face in the ads," Noem recalled at the Conservative Political Action Conference, adding that Trump told her for the first ad, quote, "I want you to thank me for closing the border." Now, that's politics, quite frankly, at its worst. I understand that on April 30th, your department awarded an additional $6.7 million to a political consulting company called People Who Think, bringing their total award for this ad to $11.6 million. Your department has also awarded $35.5 million for this ad to a company called Safe American Media. And my understanding is that you used funding originally appropriated for CBP and USCIS for these awards. This sounds like a payout to Republican political consultants to fund ads that do more to tout the president than to secure the border. How were the contracts awarded? Competitive process? If so, why is USA Spending say that the contracts were given an exclusion from the Doge Group's limitation on spending awards? This is $200 million. Somebody just talked about billboards. This is a $200 million ad campaign, taking the money from CBP and USCIS to promote a political advantage. It's really kind of the height of arrogance. You're looking for more money from us to do that, but you're going to take a portion of the money that we have given you and you're going to spend it on political advertising. I mean, that really is, in Yiddish, the word is chutzpah. It really is that you engaged in here. So I know you're going to tell me.
Would you like me to answer?
Yeah, I would. And I foresee that you're going to tell me that these were all competitively bid.
They were.
Et cetera.
Done through the exact same process as any other ad campaign would be done, absolutely. And I would tell you that it's not $200 million and that President Trump was very clear from the very beginning that he recognized that the fake news in this country was not going to tell the truth of what the work had been done at the border to secure this country. And these ads aren't only playing in the United States, they're playing in other countries
Sure. No,
where we
I
had the
understand.
largest
It's not the
invasion
point.
coming
You can
into
agree
this
or
country
disagree
from.
on the policy,
And
but it's-
overwhelmingly, if you look at the data on the ground in these countries where these ads have been
with all
playing,
due
the
respect,
flow has stopped.
with all due respect.
Even when I was in Mexico and having
Excuse me, Madam
conversations.
Secretary, the
Yes.
time is mine. With all due respect, this is a political ad campaign, and it really, let's just not try to sugarcoat it. I had just somebody talk about billboards, and you talking about how use of taxpayers' dollars. These are taxpayers' dollars as well. Let me move to the program I mentioned earlier. This is the BRIC program. In early April, FEMA cut the Building Resilient Infrastructure and Communities program, claiming, and I quote, "Under Secretary Noem, DHS is eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse," end quote. When the committee staff asked for evidence of waste, fraud, or abuse in this program, or the authority used to end the program, FEMA said that the due diligence for these projects can take a long time and failed to give examples that met GAO's definition of waste, fraud, or abuse. The legal authority you used to cancel most of these projects was also not provided. And I'm just going to make this flat-out statement. You do not have, nor does the president have, the legal authority to abrogate what the Appropriations Committee appropriates. It's the power of the purse. It's in the Constitution. And I think if I heard right in the last couple of days, the president wasn't sure that we should abide by the Constitution. But we tried to abide by the Constitution, those of us who raised our right hand and said we will abide by the Constitution. There is no legal authority. There is no inherent authority to claim the appropriations funds can be used for other than what they were appropriated for. I don't know that you can. Basic questions from your agency on essential programs that the communities represent or rely on. You all can't. You should just say waste, fraud, abuse, and you think that covers it. Well, Madam Secretary, I will tell you it doesn't. We're going to
Congresswoman,
challenge
I'll
that,
get you all
and
the
you
data
have
and
no
statute
authority.
references that we are operating under the authority that the Department of Homeland Security
You
has.
have no
and that
authority
these
to
brick
abrogate
grants-
these funds. It's
These
the
brick grants are
prerogative
being
of the
reevaluated
Appropriations
to make
Committee.
sure that they are
The
being
power
spent
of the
appropriately
purse
to which
resides
you all
here
directed they be
and not there. Keep it in mind because it is the Constitution of the United States. Thank you.
Very familiar
I'm
with.
happy to have this conversation take place off the clock, but now we're going to move to the gentleman from the Magnolia State for your second round of questioning.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Noem, I want to let you know what a refreshing hearing this has been. To have someone who comes before this committee who's plain spoken, who has a desire to secure the border, a desire to enforce the law, to have someone in your position who's willing to get out from behind a desk, to leave Washington, to go there and be there on the front lines with the men and women who serve. I just want to thank you for not being the typical bureaucrat who routinely would come before this committee time and time again under the Biden-Harris administration, who really had no idea because they had not been down there serving and alongside the men and women who were serving. So thank you for your leadership, and thank you for being plain spoken, and thank you for what you stand for. As we continue to secure the border, and as we see those numbers continue to hold, I believe at some point the DHS will be able to reallocate resources to the interior. That once those allocations or those resources have been reallocated, that we'll see those numbers of interior enforcement, we'll see those numbers increase. And one of the things that we have to do as we are contemplating this appropriations package for next year is we have to figure out the number of detention beds. And I know that the detention beds have been something of a contention with the previous administration. They always came in with an extremely low number of detention beds, knowing that Republicans then would always plus up that number to make sure that we had the number necessary. And so I guess my question as we're looking at putting next year's budget together, and as we're looking at funding detention beds, what is the number of detention beds that you feel, Madam Secretary, that you are going to need going forward?
The president has been clear from the beginning with his advisors in the White House on Homeland Security that we need much more capacity in detention beds in the country. We have upwards to 50,000 people that are in detention centers today that are moving out of the country, moving to go home to their countries, that we're negotiating and working on travel documents and repatriation with. But we have the ability to go out and act quicker in this country, but need the space in which to hold them until those processes can take place. So we need upwards to an additional 50,000 beds, 60,000 beds in order to make sure that we have the ability to not slow down enforcement operations and bring bad actors and criminals and those with final removable orders into our authority so that we can move them out faster. So, the
And Madam
whole.
Secretary, if I'm not trying to cut you off, but a lack of detention beds could be a real deterrent to your men and women being able to perform the mission that
Absolutely.
they need to do.
Absolutely.
And so if Congress wants to get serious about protecting the American people, then we're going to have to fund not only the manpower that you need, but we're going to have to fund the detention beds so those individuals can be detained, they can be brought before a judge, and then they can be ordered to be removed. Is that correct?
That is correct. And I would also just clarify and make a point that the request from reconciliation, $175 billion, is for this term of this president for the 4 years. And you see in the numbers that were released by OMB this last week that the $43 billion that would be the increase into this budget is from the reconciliation, 1/4% of what that total would be.
And want to switch gears in my last minute and a half and talk about DHS Centers for Excellence. I know that those are where DHS partners with academic institutions really across the nation. Some of those institutions include Texas A&M, my alma mater, Mississippi State University, the University of Nebraska, Arizona State. And I know as DHS is seeking to kind of realign mission areas, I've seen that there's consideration of either reducing funding or in some cases cutting the Centers for Excellence. I want you to know that while I am very want to make sure that I'm a great steward of taxpayer money, particularly at the center at Mississippi State. I've been there firsthand. I've seen the great work that they've done on unmanned aerial systems. I believe that they are an incredible return on our investment. But I would like to just ask you very quickly, as if you could share a little bit about how the department plans to invest in these critical research functions that I think are important to the mission of DHS.
Yes, and that's the evaluation that's happening. And 2 of those have already been reevaluated in Nebraska and Alaska, and we will continue to do that with the rest of the allocations that go to centers of excellence throughout the country. But we have to look at how these dollars are being spent to align with a mission that is the Department of Homeland Security. Cybersecurity, terrorism defense, building out and hardening our systems to protect our national security. So that's what's undergoing now in your state, and we will continue to evaluate that and stay in communication with you.
Thank you, Madam Secretary, and I yield back.
You know, for a guy from the Magnolia State, you had a hard time getting into schools in Mississippi, I guess, huh? You named every school in the nation except Mississippi State or something like that, but that's not the purpose of this hearing. The gentlelady from Iowa is recognized for your second round of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you again for your patience, Madam Secretary. And we know, obviously, states like mine, Iowa and South Dakota, are not necessarily border states, but certainly every state did become a border state under the previous administration with that chaos we saw. And the consequences of that porous border really reach far beyond the Rio Grande River there, the deadly fentanyl coming into our communities, the adversaries taking advantage and exploiting our immigration system. And so that's what I kind of want to touch on is the adversaries and what they were able to do, specifically China. To put it in perspective, in the first 7 months of fiscal year 2024, more than 27,000 Chinese nationals were encountered at the southern border. Under President Trump, we've seen that number drop significantly, reflecting that clear shift in deterrence and enforcement. So can you walk us through what specific mechanisms have been put in place to ensure that these individuals from adversarial nations are now being thoroughly vetted, and how that process has changed since the previous administration?
Yes, and every country is being treated the same as far as how we are treating the folks that are there and here illegally. People that came into this country from China and from other countries are all being vetted and their background checks being gone through. And I would say some of the reasons that we've had to reevaluate some of the programs that were abused under the Biden administration is because countries weren't participating with us. They weren't sharing their information. One of the things I've challenged Canada with in a lot of the discussions that we've had over recent months was they weren't taking their own citizens back home that were here in this country illegally, and they weren't sharing all of the criminal background checks of individuals who were in our country illegally. They weren't telling us who they were or what they had done, if they had human smuggling in their background or crimes. And so that was some of the access that we were asking them for. We were grateful that they addressed, for instance, designating a fentanyl czar and doing, but that information sharing is critically important. And we do not have that kind of partnership with China. We didn't just see Chinese nationals infiltrate our country over the southern border. They're coming over the northern border as well. And we see needs on the Great Lakes region and people coming in. It's easy to access Canada, and once they do, then they drop down into our vulnerable areas. So we have continued to maintain resources and strengthen them at the northern border as well. But we work closely with Interpol that has an agreement with many different countries to do vetting and background checks and criminal background information sharing on folks across the world. But many of the times when the State Department is negotiating on repatriation and travel documents, they're having discussions on what we can do to share information. When I made trips to El Salvador, to Colombia, and to Mexico, those trips were made so that I could get those governments to share more information with us. In fact, one of the things that we did while we were there is sign new agreements with those countries to share more data and information, to have them give us biometric information that they collected, to give us more thorough travel documents of individuals that were of concern here and had been breaking our laws. And so having those discussions gives us more information to make sure that this country is safer into the future.
Do you feel like those conversations have helped to inform broader national security efforts?
Absolutely.
Cross-departmentally, and when we think about the real risk here, it's these international transnational criminal gangs, the cartels, state-sponsored networks. Obviously we talk about the Chinese nationals, and the reason the PRC is not cooperating and the CCP is not cooperating is because they are intent on infiltrating our country.
That
so
is correct.
do you feel like all those relationships are really helping us to strengthen the intel that we are able to gather?
Absolutely. We've seen many, many times where information that we got on somebody who was here that may have been on our terrorist watch list, suspected terrorist watch list or someone who is a very dangerous part of a foreign terrorist organization, that information may have been shared with us from another country because of those security agreements that we have in place. And when countries do not adhere to sharing that type of information, they don't get the privileges necessary that have been granted to them in the past. And we've seen that with visa overstays, we've seen that with lack of information sharing, that perhaps they don't get to continue in programs that are under the purview of the Department of Homeland Security because they haven't been willing partners to help us secure our country.
Certainly, accountability is back, and appreciate that. So thank you so much, Madam Secretary.
Thank you.
I yield back.
Thank you. Madam Secretary, you've been kind of a marathon runner. It's 12:30, and I have endured all these questions along with you.
Good.
And so now I'm not going to be a hypocrite and ask a bunch, but I am going to highlight a couple things since you have a bunch of your staff here, because we're kind of at the going forward place. And so information, as you've just alluded to in terms of international stuff, is important here as well. Several people have talked about the BRIC program in FEMA. And what I think is missing in the evaluation is, your initial reaction is, okay, so a bunch of stuff got canceled. And so it's like, okay, why? And it's like, listen, if there was an analysis done and it was like, hey, this flunked it, it was whatever, the answer that we don't want is, well, and I'm not saying you guys did it, but it's like, hey, we ran an algorithm or OMB did something or whatever, and it got canceled. So it's like, well, then tell us who at OMB so we can go to them and say, we'd like to know why you did that, which I think is a legitimate thing. So what I think I'm going to do is, instead of saying, the hard question, and well, you'd commit to do a case-by-case review, it's like you guys got other stuff to do than a case-by-case. What I'm thinking about doing, and the committee members that are still here, thank you for, is to say, listen, each member, you got 3 things you want an answer, a specific answer for, give them to us to transmit on, and they'll do that analysis.
Great.
So that's my thought on that. I'm not a CISA guy, you know that. I mean, I can barely use one of these, God knows who's listening right now. But anyhow, having said that, when I see, and I get elections and redirection and all that other sort of stuff, but when I see, here we go, and we've got Chairman Green and other folks going, my God, China's kicking our butt and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, we did this many through, not that you did, but anyhow, this many retired, this many got this many got that. And then I look at the skinny budgets, like, by the way, we're taking more. And I think somebody got into it. It's like, what is the plan? So when, and you've been there long enough, you know, it's when somebody goes, hey, you guys presided over cutting $500 million in CISA to do other stuff. What was that based on? Clearly, we don't want to be in the position and won't be in the position of, well, I don't know, that's what they said they needed. Not that there's a trust factor there, there's not, but it's like, we need some building blocks for whoever the CISA people are, whatever. It's like, what's the plan for us to be kicking China's butt, or whatever you want to, however you want to describe it, and how we're still okay on that civilian sector stuff. And by the way, that's stuff we need, because when it comes to markup for this committee to transmit it on to the bigger committee, I mean, we need solid ground for that sort of stuff. TSA, same thing. I'll tell you what I've heard so far is that the state of the equipment that they're using, whether they're screening your purse or your checked baggage or whatever, I'm familiar with one situation where it's like, hey, the equipment's 15 years old. Nobody services it in that neighborhood. They got to have somebody come over the hill from California. And by the way, that takes a while. And in the meantime, they're not screening the bags before they go on the plane, or it takes forever. So we're going to be focusing on what are you doing to upgrade, just the same as you are on the board. Like, what are you doing to upgrade that technology? And the last thing I've got before we get to thank you, Jesus, closing statement. The last thing is, and we've got around the edge of it, when we talk about ICE operational tempo, I can't tell you how often or how quick it's going to take me to get Amadei from apprehended through whatever the process is and on a plane going back to where he belongs. But we need some structure for, hey, we're just blowing and going and we'll just let you know. It's like, somebody, I would think that there would be an idea to say, listen, this may change, but right now, from what we know for running the outfit for 4 months, this is kind of our average from stack 'em and rack 'em and 3 hots in a cot to we're going to the airport. Some basis that when you're asked that question, not you, but us, how come what are you doing with detention beds? It's like, well, listen, they got 51,000 now, but here's what we think the operational tempo is going to be. And by the way, if it changes, then all it takes is, we got an uptick, we got a downtick, but we don't expect it to. But some sort of thing to say, listen, the average cost of shipping somebody out, it takes us, we need a detention bed for 6 days on the average or whatever it is. And that's the problem, Madam Secretary. I don't know what it is. So when we say, and you know, somebody said, hey, well, how many more beds you need? It's like, I get you're trying to be responsive, but there's no ability to go say, here's what the number is based on. It may change, but here's what it's based on right now. And so that would be necessary on this stuff. So listen, they wrote this stuff, and they did a great job. Thank you. Before we wrap up, reconciliation, significant investments. Yeah, okay, that's all good. Somebody said that. I know the department hopes to be made whole with reconciliation, but in the meantime, you need to live within your means. It's our job as members to make sure the department is appropriately spending the money Congress provides, as well as to ensure the department has the resources that it needs to execute its mission on an annual basis. That work begins in earnest today as we begin the 26 process. We will move quickly but not hastily, working with every member to produce a bill that will pass the House and floor as we have done in the last few years. I expect the department to be a good partner in the process, and I ask you for your commitment that communication between this committee and your department will be significantly better moving forward. That's not what's he mean by that? It's like, we need better communication. I'm interested in going forward. We expect to receive routine briefings and reports from DHS on time and any changes and programs and policy. It is your absolute prerogative to make changes. Please tell us. To be proactively communicated so that we can work collaboratively and to secure the homeland. Here's my promise to you. We won't surprise you. Please don't surprise us. While everybody else is good with that, sometimes, you know, I'm a lot older than you are, so sometimes I react poorly. For the get back questions that members of the subcommittee had today, we ask that you respond in 15 business days. There will be some additional questions members provide in writing. We ask you to respond to those in 30 days, and here's the part you've been waiting for. I'd like to thank you, Madam Secretary, for being here today. The subcommittee stands adjourned.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.